order. All members are present. We're going to go right on to item E on the agenda. This is a matter for discussion only. It's an ordinance to repeal and recreate the city zoning code. At this time, I'm going to turn the meeting over to
Mr. Scher is
Scher, and
making a
he's-
copy
he-
for
he
Vince
went
right
Oh, he's
now.
making you a copy, that's right.
Yeah, I made a copy.
To the planning department.
Okay. Well, we can get started, I think, yeah. So this is our meeting and our time to kind of go over the
Tell us who you are, please. I don't think everyone knows who you are.
Okay, good call. I'm Zach Roeder. I'm a planner. And
Tony Guerin also.
Yeah, Tony, we know you.
I'm
Zach,
a
you're
newer planner. Yeah, I think I've met most of you, but
Yeah.
not all of you, maybe.
Thank you.
So this is our proposed zoning code update, and we've been working on this for a few months, and are at a point where we want to bring it to you guys to share, all the big changes we're going to be doing, and get your input on. I think we have specifically, I think we have 5 kind of key things where we're going to be asking you guys. If you guys have any questions, comments, and then we're going to have you kind of vote on some of the things as well informally, just to kind of give us some guidance about where we want to kind of keep taking this.
I believe there are about 5 questions that we'll be asking
Yep.
for your guidance.
Yeah, and we'll go over kind of reviewing the kind of key changes throughout. So just a kind of a refresher on why we're doing this. We've talked to this with you guys before. We have kind of 3 key objectives with this zoning code update. So the overall number one thing is we want to make it easier to use. Right now it's very, very long, burdensome, difficult for somebody who isn't like a legal expert to kind of determine what they can do with their property, can't do with their property. So we're going to be doing a lot of changes to make that easier. Another goal is to build the amount of taxable value in the city. We want to allow more density where appropriate, help property owners have more flexibility for development, and lower the burden for new projects. And then our third objective is to really fit the West Allis of today and tomorrow. The last zoning code update the last real overhaul was done in 1995. And I mean, that was before I was born. I think I've mentioned this to a few of you.
Oh, come on, there you go.
But this is
Letter is from me.
this
Oh,
is
that hurt. That hurt.
The best part is I used to tell that joke also.
Yeah.
But now I know.
Years have passed and you
Yeah,
can't
no. Now I'm an old guy too. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
know your audience.
It's right.
I can't believe that.
Partial copy, I had a paper jam, so you got about good solid 30 pages of it right there, so. Same for you, Vince, yeah.
Thank you, Steve. Appreciate
Steve. I was just starting to introduce it. 'cause
Oh,
we had
good.
started. But
Sure.
yeah, I'll just finish up this slide here. So yeah, we want to really rethink this for thinking for today and in the future. There's a lot of parts of our code which are very outdated. We don't need anymore, and there's other things we want to, as West Allis changes, we want to make sure we're going in the right direction. So I'll turn over to Steve for this next part.
Okay, so yeah, we're gonna go take you through the various highlights and sections of the code that's been prepared. If you haven't had a chance to review it as of yet, don't worry. We're gonna hit the high points. There'll be time during and after for questions and answers. So if you have any questions along the way, feel free to let us know.
All right, yeah, and these, just so you guys know, these 2 sections, we really won't be covering much on. The changes in the administration kind of section and plan development section are very small, and so we're just going to really be focusing on those 4 in the middle there. All right, I can start here. All right, so the first big section is our district section. So this, says, this is where we establish our zoning districts and, what can be built where, kind of is all built from this section on. So this is our proposed zoning district table. We have it's very similar to what we have right now. We have a group of residential districts, a group of commercial districts, a group of manufacturing districts, and then our other districts, which are our park district and state fair park district. The changes to our zoning districts are really just concentrated in the residential districts. The other things aren't changing. So what we're going to be doing what we're proposing in this update is to consolidate some of the residential districts. There's specifically 4 that we're going to be merging into other districts that are already there. The graph on the right actually shows the number of properties that are zoned to each residential district in the city. You'll see there's certain ones of, especially our RE district and RC2, where only a handful of lots in the entire city have that zoning. And what we see when we look at the zoning is that a lot of these districts are, there's very few of them, and they're very similar in the regulations to other districts. So we want to merge them where possible to make our zoning code easier to understand, more efficient. It's just kind of these redundancies that we don't really need. Another benefit of this is we're going to be working to promote the conformance of our lots. Sometimes we have lots in some districts that they don't quite meet what the current district standards are, and by merging these, it'll kind of increase the amount of conformance we have for residential properties. So just going one by one then to look at these changes. The first is to merge our RE district, currently called our residential estate district, into the RA district, RA1 district, sorry. So the RE is in light blue there. There's just 30 properties on a couple blocks, and it'll be merging with the rest of the districts, or rest of the properties in the area. Here's an example actually of two neighbors. One is zoned RA1 on the left, and one is RE on the right. They don't look any different to me. They're very similar types of properties, these kind of largely single family properties. And so we want to kind of consider these together, and they'll just be called RA1.
Zach, I have a question.
Yes.
What does RA stand for?
RA is kind of just a designation. We have our RA districts, our RB districts, and RC districts. So RA is largely more like detached homes, single family and duplexes. RB is kind of the traditional neighborhood style, and you'll see that more on the east side of West Allis with this kind of smaller lots, and then you'll have a mix of housing types. And then RC is like larger still, so that's like more like apartment complexes. So it kind of goes A is smaller, B is middle, C is the largest.
Are there any RE uses that are being used as RE estates?
So estates is, I think, a kind of a grand term from when they created this zoning.
There were a number of restrictive covenants when the homes across just west of Hale were built. And I think, for some reason, those restrictive covenants may have, because they were exclusive at the time, I think the city planner at the time may have picked up on that and just decided, well, we're going to call these something different from the rest of the residential zoning districts in the city. So we ended up with an RE district, which is just those 31 properties. And then the RA1 is like Orchard Hills and, some of those
So
other.
there's no use in RE that you're gonna automatically put into RA.
Yeah,
Nothing
No,
new.
nothing-
Yeah.
nothing new. It's all
We
the
won't
same.
make anyone non-conforming, and there wouldn't be anything that you're not getting
yeah, those are basically
by merging
Vince
it.
can't go and build a house for his maid and butler on his backyard. Can he?
Well, for an accessory dwelling unit, you could, actually. That'll be
You
a
could,
future
right?
section we'll get into in a bit, yeah, so yeah.
That's where Fonzie lives,
Yeah.
of the garage.
I could build one across the street by me.
Yeah, but the function of both of these districts is
park,
like
you know,
larger
same.
lots and a single, single
okay.
building. That's kind of, why we want to merge them together. So the next one is going to be, we're combining our RA4 district, which you see in light blue. It's really just in the southeast corner of the city, pretty much. There's actually a couple of random spots in the middle that are also zoned RA4. We're going to be merging that into the RA3 district. Here's some examples of the types of homes you might see in these districts. They're both pretty similar, kind of smaller, typically ranch-style homes on kind of small to moderate-sized lots, and these ones are good examples of having a very similar character. So we want to merge these together. Next is the RB district. So right now we have RB1 and RB2. RB2 is the dark blue. It's basically all of the residential area on the east side of West Allis. RB1 and it was originally intended as this kind of transitional district between some more commercial areas and some of the RA residential districts. There aren't a lot of differences though between the RB districts, and we want to just combine these into one, considering there's really not that many RB1 buildings at all. So that's another good example of just very similar types of regulations and types of homes there. And here's examples of some of the homes that you'll see in these districts. And then RC is those kind of large multifamily kind of complexes. The dark blue is our RC2, and I believe, and then the light blue is RC1. I'm pretty sure. Yeah. And then here's some pictures of what those look like. The RC2 on the right, that's at 70th and Greenfield. RC1 is, I think,
102nd.
102nd and Lincoln. So yeah, those are just very similar styles of housing, and we want to kind of consider them just as one. That brings us to our next, I guess before we move on, any more questions about that or comments or anything?
I just want to make sure that when we're doing this, we're not creating some unintended uses in other words, somebody's not going to be able to come here and say, hey, they couldn't build a duplex next to me before, and now they're building a duplex on a 40-foot lot or something.
Right, so far with the merging that's taking place from merging RE into RA, that won't happen. With the merging of RA3 into RA4, I guess, so none of that, to answer your question, none of that can happen. I guess some points later on, I guess, with respect to increasing the density.
Okay.
In some cases, there will be a policy decision on that if you want to introduce some changes where perhaps to allow a little bit higher density in some traditionally single-family districts. That'll be an option for you to consider as we go.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah.
Steve, per se that we have, I mean, not just in my district, but throughout the city that built those apartment complex
Yeah.
only about 3 feet away from the sidewalk years back, you know. So what happened if a fire would occur, you know, the buildings get destroyed? So is anything that we can apply to, in case to get rebuilt it, not to build it in the same lot size, the same size building? Like I said, on 64th and Lincoln, you know, next to Richland, well, you have such huge apartments. You know, years ago, they used to abutting right with the sidewalk, really. I was only
Yeah.
2 feet away.
So if the state statutes actually it creates an allowance for rebuilding a non-conforming structure.
Yeah.
So if there were, you know, whether it be an act of God like a storm or something that knocked the house down or a fire, you could rebuild within the same footprint.
Same footprint, no changes.
Correct, right.
Okay.
So that's covered within the state statutes
Okay.
and
Thank
would
you.
also be reflected in our code as well.
Yeah, I always been kind of, years ago, I think, you know, the past planners, I think they done something, I think it was not really appropriate, you know. I know Mayor Barlick, at that time, he did a lot of things that, I mean, I shouldn't talk about him, but, he did, Tom, I mean, but that's what really happens. A lot of the things were done because, you know, but building apartments close to the sidewalks, you know.
All right, ready for the next section? We're going to be talking about uses, and we'll be mostly talking about commercial business uses. So just to go over some of the terms here, we're still keeping the term permitted use, which just basically means any use that's allowed versus not permitted. Limited use is permitted if it meets certain criteria. So for example, tobacco retailer can't be within 1,000 feet of parks, schools, and other tobacco retailers. And the biggest change here is that we're changing our terminology of special use to conditional use, just because it makes more sense. It's, you know, in the word, and it's the same term that other municipalities use as well. So here's some of the changes we're making. We're going to be removing some of the outdated uses, for example, mail order catalog stores and millinery shops, and we'll also be organizing by general categories. So for example, retail, service, civic, and within those, we're consolidating even further. So for example, the table to the right is a list of several of the older uses they all have the same permissions across the board, and we're consolidating those into, for example, bike shop, bookstore, clothing store. They all can fit into neighborhood retail. And we'll also still be regulating some of the sensitive uses individually. So tobacco retailer again, for example, or alcohol beverage sales, or kennels, for example. We want to make sure that those have their own, they're permitted in certain districts and have their own regulations. We're also updating where some of these uses can be located. So I'll just go down the list of the most important uses. So tobacco retailer, we're not permitting that in the C1 district. Kennel will be removed from the C4 district, not permitted. Event space and theater, smaller ones, less than 5,000 square feet, will be permitted in C2, C3, and C4. And larger theaters will be a conditional use in C2, C3, and C4. Daycares were permitted in the downtown, and we are removing that. Sport shooting range, we're having those be not permitted in C2 and C3, but still permitted in C4 and the manufacturing districts. Substation distribution will be a conditional use in parklands, and wireless communication structures will be not permitted in C3 and C4.
Tony,
Yes.
on the wireless, does that, that 5G is like, that mean we're not getting 5G? 5G sits on like a tower of
Yeah.
a block, doesn't it?
Yeah, so there's a difference.
Different
There's a
than that-
difference.
That's not what we're talking about
Yeah,
here.
so those would be, we have, I think it's called wireless co-location right now, right?
Right,
It,
right.
it's a, you can still use them as accessory uses on any property, pretty much in any district.
Okay.
This is for if, Verizon wanted to use a whole property to build a huge radio tower just for, a huge antenna or something. That's what this kind of would be. It's a single structure just for that. So, yeah.
So you're saying, essentially, we're telling them they can't build any new antennas in the city of West Dallas, except for,
It's okay as a secondary use of a property, but if you're gonna use a whole
it
property,
can't be the sole use?
yeah, you can't
Okay.
use, like, we don't want somebody to put, right next to, I'm just thinking off the top of my head, think of like the Panda Express, I guess, on a Highway 100 in Cleveland.
Yeah.
That's zoned C4 right now, and right now you could use that property and build a huge radio tower on it.
And there'd be
we
no
don't-
other use there?
Yeah, exactly. So we don't want that to be the sole use of a property if it's not in a manufacturing
This would
district.
be an accessory use. Okay. Thank you.
We'll also be introducing a new use called Commercial Light Industrial Flex. So we really like the example of Able and Kohler over on Highway 100, where they have the showroom in the front and the distribution center in the back. So the definition is shared light industrial and commercial use, with the commercial use being associated with the light industrial use. We want to make sure that we don't include self-storage into this definition, so those will be not allowed within this new use. Some numbers we're working with right now is within C3, we're suggesting 20% or more must be consumer-oriented, and in C4 it would be 10% or more. If you all have suggestions, we're open to them. And then this would be conditional use in C3 and C4 and permitted in the manufacturing districts.
That brings us to accessory uses. So Tony just spoke about principal uses, the primary use of the property. Accessory uses are a subordinate use to the principal use. So really, all of these things would be allowed currently now, more or less, as an accessory use. So there's really nothing new here, but we're just reorganizing it into a table, and then using the same format with, P for permitted, C for conditional, L for limited use, and then going across the top with the different zoning districts. So for instance, in just going right off the top, with an accessory dwelling unit, we'll get into those next, what they are. But say, for instance, you wanted to build a small little accessory house on your property, a small cottage that you could rent out, or you could have your a family member live in it. You live in your primary residence, but in the backyard you have a glorified shed or house to put an in-line, for instance. So those would all be allowed as a limited use across the board in all of our residential zoning districts, and then some of our C2, C3, and C4 commercial districts, where there is occasionally some single-family or two-family homes. And this would be accessory dwelling units, sort of getting ahead of myself here, but they would be focused on single or two-family homes. And then, drive-throughs are accessory to a restaurant, for instance. So those, are conditional uses within the commercial zoning. Kennels, we had talked about kennels a little bit. The principal use of kennel is allowed, I think, in an M1 and M2 zoning district as proposed in this ordinance. But if you're a veterinary clinic and you happen to have a boarding accessory use, you happen to offer some boarding or an overnight stay for animal, it would be allowed in the commercial zoning districts as the C2, C1 and C2. C1 being our downtown area, C2 a neighborhood commercial area as a conditional use, and then a limited use in the other commercial and manufacturing zoning districts. So as a limited use, it's allowed, but there are some stipulations. So there might be, in the case of a conditional use in the downtown area, the reason they're conditional in C1 and C2 for kennels, that is, I would imagine that, if you're going to have an outdoor, if you propose an outdoor kennel, we'd probably have a stipulation in the ordinance that says no outdoor. It has to be an indoor boarding as an accessory, whereas in the C3, C4, and M districts, you could have the option for an outdoor option, like the Pauley Animal Clinic on Highway 100 in Oklahoma. So,
Steve, could you remind us which of these would trigger a neighborhood or public hearing where the neighbors get to weigh in on it?
the conditional uses,
Conditional uses?
correct, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
The limited use, again, that'd just be a standard setback, they can come in.
Limited
the
is
neighbors aren't
allowed,
necessarily
but
notified.
subject to these standards, it would, which could be,
So
we get into
anything up
next.
there with a C
Yeah,
would generate a public hearing and neighbor notification.
that's correct, yeah. Yeah. So, some of the newer, I guess there are some newer accessory uses, and not to say that we wouldn't allow them now, but calling them out specifically here, solar energy systems, wind energy systems are noted up there as newer. We see that becoming more relevant and obviously more prolific in the future. So, we just want to call them out in advance within our update here. So, okay, gotcha. And we talked a little bit about accessory dwelling units. Again, an accessory use focused primarily on single and two-family homes. In other words, if you have a four-family, you can't build a small little cottage in your background or in your backyard for an accessory dwelling unit or ADU. So these are just a smaller house or cottage on the same property as your primary residence. And there are some benefits to these. I mean, they offer, citizens of West Allis that own properties a little bit extra flexibility, where you could potentially make a little bit offset your mortgage on your primary residence. It does offer some another housing option for people that want to rent. Maybe they don't want to live in a big apartment, but they'd like a more residential neighborhood setting. This is a great way to introduce that to the city. Wauwatosa has this allowance within their zoning code, and our proposed ordinance really is more or less mimicking what Wauwatosa has. In Wauwatosa, they do have a little bit some, I guess, design criteria as part of their accessory dwelling units, where the accessory dwelling unit needs to match the primary residence in terms of like the roof pitch, the siding or trim. If it's a brick, veneer, something like that would need to sort of tie in with the primary residence. Not a bad idea, and it's something to consider, but I just wanted to put that out there. So, but you can only have one per lot, so on your residential lot, single or two family, you can only do one of these, and it would have to be, I guess, a single family. You can't build another duplex ADU. It would have to be a single unit, dwelling unit. And in terms of taxable value, we feel that, obviously these would have to meet building code. You'd have to pull a building permit to build one of these on your lot. It would have to meet certain setback requirements and design requirements if so need be. And but it would add to the taxable value and increase the density of, in some cases, some of our neighborhoods. I don't think everybody's going to do one, but certainly it would be an option for those that are interested to consider. And we have been getting a number of concerns or questions, over the past number of years. I'd like to do an accessory dwelling unit. Can I do it? And well, the answer's been no, not yet. So this is at least one option.
Steve, I like the idea of having some design criteria, because I think that's very important.
Okay.
Are there any limitations to the amount of lot size that you have to do this? Because I certainly wouldn't want to see one of these on a 30-foot lot in the first district where you got the house and the garage and now you got nothing but all dwelling in a 30-foot lot.
That brings up a good point too. Is in that one thing we're going to be considering with this zoning code update is increasing some of the buildable area in the RB district because a lot of times people aren't able to build certain things on their property that other people can because their lots are so small. And I think with those smaller lots, we would definitely, our limitations would kind of prevent them from, building out a whole new building for their ADU. But there's a style, if you actually, I guess you can see it right here. There's a style where you do an above a garage type accessory dwelling unit, and something like that would probably be more appropriate for the RB district with those smaller 30-foot lots.
I'm just thinking, we're already parking impacted on the east end of town. Is this a wise move to do in areas where you have small lots and not enough parking on the properties to begin with? They're parked on the streets. I certainly can see that happening on the west end of town where you have bigger lots. It's not an issue. I'm a little concerned about the east end.
Okay.
Chair, Steve, I
Yep.
have a question. Using my home as an example, I have a duplex. I have a sizable lot, average size lot. If I wanted to do an accessory dwelling, could I, being I have a duplex already? So it's not subjected to just like a single family property.
Yes, you may. Yeah, according, at least in this draft, you could.
In the current code, you couldn't, but in our proposed, you could.
Yeah.
Okay, proposed one, but now, looking at my garage as it's styled, now if I wanted to put an accessory dwelling above that, we have power lines, other things. How is that dealt with? That is then the homeowner, the property owners,
Yeah.
with the
Ec-
utility companies to have to pay to have them moved, and so that, all that is within the criteria of what we would require. correct?
Absolutely. I mean, it could become cost prohibitive depending on what you need to relocate. I mean, if there's wires that need to be relocated, or even building codes could become somewhat prohibitive on these types of things, where I just want to put a little apartment above my garage, but I mean,
Right.
Got to run water, sewer,
you have to have water,
everything.
sewer,
Yeah, my
utilities,
position,
and
for example, would
yeah.
be a tri-yard, and you're impacting everybody else because that
Right.
pole is accessible right there, so I
Right.
won't be having one, but.
so yeah. So it's probably not for everybody, but we at least wanted to stay competitive and current within our zoning. We wanted to at least make an offering within our code.
To kind of echo that lot size, would we be able to curtail the size lot that we would allow these on?
You could, in our situation here, I think, it comes up a little later. I think in a few slides down the road here, we have the criteria for accessory dwelling units and, the setback requirements, the lot coverage requirements. So the way we have it structured right now is that they would be allowed as limited uses across all of our residential zoning districts as well as some of those commercial zoning districts, with lot coverage, requirements applicable to not only the principal building but to the inclusive of the ADU, setbacks. So there would be control over,
There's
I
also-
guess, where it can go on the property. And
There's also we would also be introducing a size limit on how large the accessory dwelling unit could be. So I think the limit is only about 650 square feet,
it's like a small apartment, yeah, basically.
or
yeah.
or a certain percentage of the principal dwelling unit. So there's a size restriction on them, and I think typically the type of people who live in accessory dwelling units, I think often you'll see like in-laws, grandparents who want to live close to be close with the family, but they aren't maybe able to live independently anymore. That's a common thing in accessory dwelling units. So they often will have fewer vehicles and stuff than they're living in a very small unit. They're less as likely to have some of those same problems with over density of a space than maybe somebody who would be living in a single family house. Not like you're adding another single family house there. It's a smaller apartment, so there might be a little bit different impacts on the community than adding a full another house. Just something to consider as well.
Mr. Chair, I have a couple more questions on this. So, an ADU requires a bathroom?
Yeah.
Do we limit the number of, bedrooms? They're mostly gonna be like studios, I would assume, right? Are we gonna put a limit on the number of heads that can be sleeping in there every night, and is there any way to manage that?
I mean, I would have to look at maybe some other, I don't know that you can. I mean, I think if you have a 650 square foot, like say the one example on top, or, either one of those, I mean, I don't know how many people you can
Well, that's the
comfortably
question.
put
Doesn't
there.
the state, isn't there a state law on how many people can be residing based on the square footage? If I remember, it was very generous, though. I mean, as far as allowing a lot of people.
5 unrelated or something like that, I think,
well,
yeah.
You know,
yeah,
and the parking thing, I'm kind of like this on it.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us have dealt with people that don't have enough parking in their neighborhoods, but when you look in their garage, there's not a single car, and they have a 3-car garage with no cars in it, you know? So we are in fact providing overnight parking for 30 cents a night or whatever parking permit costs, you know, for on-street. Does this qualify as a second address as far as getting more parking permits?
That's something we'd have to, I guess, work with building inspections on, but there would likely be, there would have to be a special designation for the property for emergency services to identify that this is a separate
Because
living
the
unit,
police,
probably
I
separately
don't know that
addressed.
we'd want to be start handing out, oh, that's a new address, so they're entitled to whatever is it, 2 or 3 more overnight parking, 3 new parking permits per ADU. That-
Calling in per month or.
Yeah, whatever that, I think we need to take a look at that. I'm in favor of it. I've stayed in these ADUs, you know, Airbnbs, they turn into that quite often. I stayed in a couple of
That's
those.
what I was gonna ask, is that's what it's gonna encourage, Airbnbs and
Yeah.
Verbos.
Yeah, and that's fine. I don't have a
As
problem
long
with that.
as long as they're inspected and
Yep,
regulated,
follow
I
the
have no
rules.
problem with it.
We had in my district, somebody who converted their garage in an ADU without doing it, and building inspector got on them. I'm not sure where that stands right now, because that was actually rather recent. But I don't know that they put a bathroom in. I think they just insulated the upper. They insulated the upper in a garage, and then they put some beds in there, because the neighbors reported there were lights were on there all the time. That's not an ADU, that's just residing in a garage.
Yeah.
That's just
You know.
living in an attic.
Yeah, that's a good point too. That there's people can probably do approximations of ADUs right now.
Yeah.
The difference is that it has to have the facilities of a what would be
apartment,
considered a
yeah.
dwelling unit.
So it has to have
the-
heat,
Has to have,
Yes.
yeah, it has to
But
have heat, kitchen, some
not
sort of
required to have
food
air
preparation.
conditioning.
No.
Doesn't
well,
require
no,
AC, I
no.
don't believe.
But
But it
you're
would have to have a
basically-
bathroom at least?
Yes.
Does it require a kitchen?
I don't know if it does a full kitchen necessarily. There might be some sort of
Whatever, I would say whatever like a studio apartment would require, I would imagine be the minimum. So it's gonna have to meet, because you're basically in this, lower case, you're converting a storage garage or
Yeah.
to a habitable upper unit there. So it's gonna have to meet minimum standards of, an apartment,
Yes.
like for building code purposes.
Yeah. I'm in favor in this, in the general concept. I like the idea of some sort of plan review as far as fitting with the architecture of the existing building. So we don't have somebody putting up like metal siding in next to a brick colonial or something like that, so. And then one more question. Do we know, does this count as net new construction for the levy limit? And you guys probably don't know
Oh,
that.
for the levy, no.
Does this count as net new construction?
Do you know,
Our
Patrick?
assessor.
I know what you're talking about, but
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it would be value gain.
It's a good question.
Yeah. If you convert a garage to a two-bedroom apartment,
If they pull a building permit, then it's fair game for them to be revalued.
well, I'm not talking about raising, I'm not talking about just raising the taxes on the property owner. I'm talking about for the levy limit.
The levy limits.
For the levy limit.
Net new growth.
Is it net new growth? Which is, that's one of the things, one of our challenges for financing.
Well, what
Finance
happens, I guess,
director has a worksheet that he has to fill out for the State Department of Revenue, and it's whatever he puts on the worksheet. And so if he can honestly identify that as additional construction in that worksheet, I think the answer is yes.
I would think so. Let's make
I'm
sure
gonna
that's
go with what
recorded,
you
too.
say. He's an attorney. Must be true, yeah. Okay, thank you.
okay.
Where do tiny houses fit under ADU?
I think they would. They would if they're an accessory to the principal unit. So you couldn't just have a blank lot and build, a tiny
tiny
home
houses.
necessarily. Within our code, it's possible, I believe, but
Yeah.
that's not. It would be like a secondary. You could basically move in a tiny home onto the back of your property as long as it meets the, requirements that we have, design-wise and size-wise and everything.
I don't know how that would work with, like if the tiny home, or if the,
It might have plumbing.
if the
I guess.
ADU, so to speak, is a trailer, like it was on wheels. I don't know that would qualify in this case.
Yeah, I guess because it needs plumbing, correct?
Yeah, well, it needs a plumbing hookup, and I believe it has to be anchored to the ground.
Well, you can plumb something on wheels, I mean,
Yeah.
as
Sure.
long as you
Yep,
have
they
the
do it all the
hookup,
time.
so,
Yep,
Yeah.
every trailer park.
yeah.
So, but maybe that would come into play with some of the requirements. We can maybe flush that out a little bit to see how that works, if it's on wheels versus
Yeah, we don't
permanently fixed
want
to a
people just
foundation.
parking a trailer in their backyard.
Yeah.
Plumbing it in and calling it an ADU.
Right, so it has to be like structured. Right.
Well, requiring a building permit,
Yeah,
requiring
I mean,
footings.
you might get people parking school buses and,
Yeah.
living out of them or
And
something.
put it up on blocks, take the wheels off of
Yeah,
it.
right.
Could even take the engine out of it.
Yeah, that could be a good
Right.
condition we can, or a limitation we can add, that it has to be, structured. We can talk with our,
Does it have a foundation?
has to have a foundation.
Yeah.
We can talk with our,
Footings and
attorneys. or
foundation.
whatever.
Either slab on
been-
grade or footings and foundation.
We've been working real close with Kale, city attorney, on this whole ordinance, so, I mean, that's a good question we can raise with Kale. Yeah, thank you.
So I guess before we move on, in favor of proceeding with ADUs versus, raise your hand if you're in favor of it, yeah,
Yeah, with restrictions.
with
Okay.
restrictions, okay.
Yeah. Matching the property.
Yep.
Structure can't be moved. Obviously, has to adhere to the building guidelines and setbacks on rear, side, front lots, things like that.
You want to say it requires a bathroom and a separate sink, which would help
Is
define
there
a
any
kitchen?
special requirements in building a place over the top of a garage?
I would think, because
Yeah,
the
Fire-wise with gasoline and a motor
yeah,
vehicle down there?
proper separations, fire separations, and then,
I think our building code would address that.
building code would definitely come
Okay.
into play there.
Yeah. Just like in a mixed-use building?
Yeah. Then home occupations, a current topic, right, for everyone. So it's been obviously the first slide here, just sort of the trend is that it's growing. It's a big industry. Nationally, 500 billion annually. A lot run by by women, and historically it's been a part of not only our city, but I guess nationally it's been something that's been around for some time. So it's not really a new phenomenon. I think it's been sort of nudged a bit and woke up again, I guess, with not only COVID, but just new ways of doing things, entrepreneurial spirit about. So we'd like to encourage it within our city, but there are limits, and you have to be careful. There's a balance, right? So there's certain uses that we're going to be proposing. We'll show you where we're at right now, and then we'll show you what we're proposing. So there's going to be permitted uses, but then there's also going to be standards that are in play too. And the two, we think, have to go kind of hand in hand, so that you have a certain list of allowable uses, and then standards that go along with those. And together, I think they work out pretty well. So on the left, this is our existing zoning code, section 1217 of the zoning that allows for these are the exact list of all the uses that are allowed now in the home occupancy section. All are, for the most part, low intensity, not very wild uses. But there's that last bullet point that says other similar occupations with the approval of the city. So that it gets, there's some interpretation there that's introduced, and even with with the list above, I mean, there's interpretations of what home crafts can be, or music lessons, and so on. But so and the standards on the right, these are currently within our code as well. So if you pass, I guess, that first column, then you need to prove that you pass the second column, which are the standards that are, are you a single or two-family dwelling or a condominium? How much of the floor area is going to be used for the business? You can't have 100%. It's got to be, a small
Goes out and
percentage.
looks at that.
What's that? Well, we don't go out and look. See, that's the thing with home occupancies. The building inspections department, there's an occupancy, BP Logics is the way to apply for it. We review it, and then if we approve it, building inspection is not going to the site to say, oh, let me show me your office and show me the dimensions. We take what they give us in the application, and if it passes the uses and the standards, it's approved. If we have a question about, is this there's maybe some twist, like a certain type of use that's maybe a tweener, like a home craft that might have some possibility of creating a nuisance, so to speak, or some kind of concern, we'll often share it with our health department or building inspections department just to see what they know about the property, perhaps the occupant, any concerns on the actual use, if it's going to trigger some kind of different building code. But you'll notice too on the right, usually there shouldn't, with these home occupancies, there shouldn't be any interior or exterior alterations. So you shouldn't be, as part of that home occupancy, taking out a bedroom and expanding your kitchen, to do your home baking. But
Shouldn't, but we don't know.
shouldn't, but we don't know. And, certainly someone would need to technically apply for a permit if you are, expanding from you're changing your bedroom to a kitchen. It does trigger permits if they apply. So, but yeah.
Steve, in reference of, changing of the zoning, which I am 100% in favor, how in the world a few years ago, between 55th and 56th, between Lincoln and Hayes, somebody applied for a permit to put a garage. The garage turned out to be higher, just about where the house stands. I mean, the garage should be lower,
Yeah.
but it's almost the same height.
Right.
He built a commercial, really, garage, all big over doors, and
Yeah.
with another garage, which to me was not within the zone. It was really totally illegal.
We'll actually get to that
Yeah.
later on in our
Oh, you
structure
will?
section.
Yeah.
We have some. We'll talk about some of our
That's
structural
coming up
regulations.
Okay.
next. Yep.
Steve,
Chair?
Yep.
Steve?
Yep.
I'm just gonna base the permitted occupations, I'll give you an example, and this is the one thing that I brought up about if somebody's doing haircutting services. I can tell you they're not just pulling you up to the kitchen table and using their kitchen sink. They're full on clearing out a space, they're putting plumbing, a sink in that you can adequately do shampoos, chemical services, other things that if you would come into a regular business, you need venting, you need all this criteria to be met. So that was one of my concerns, is even if the state is allowing under that specific licensure that you can do that out of your home, that people are just doing that because, okay, the state said they can, but they're not aware that, hey, you have to do this. They have public advertising of it. And it's not just, okay, we're making cookies in the kitchen and selling them, or crafting and doing bake sales, or, kind of have that desire. It's full-on businesses that are being operated from homes. That's my concern, and I wouldn't say it's to knock the entrepreneurial spirit. We want people to open businesses.
Yeah.
But we have to have, I think, very concise categories. And that other singular occupations with approval really just gives you so much variance.
Yeah.
So if you meet that list, you
Yeah.
can do it. If you don't, you don't.
So what we're proposing, at least there's a few options here too, but what we're proposing in the ordinance is on the left. And so we went from that long list that you saw on the previous slide of permitted uses to, a consolidated list. So it's shorter. We've simplified it to art studios. There's the dental labs. That's the non-patient type of use. So it's not a dentist office. It's they make dentures or crowns or something like that. And family child care homes, home baking crafts, instructional training. We've just put in there 8 or fewer people. So for instance, like music lessons or computer lessons, I don't know, whatever someone wanted to teach a small group of people. And then office. So that's what we've boiled it down to. So if you fit that permitted use category, there would also be the same standards in play that we had talked about previously on the within our current code. So together we feel that this is fair. Another option, which was recently mentioned, introduced to us, was maybe taking a look at perhaps an impact-based option, and that would be, there's perhaps a short list of no-impact uses, and then a short list of low-impact uses. So, for instance, in terms of no impact, if you don't know your neighbor is actually doing working from home or doing a home business. That's probably the best way to, explain it. But maybe some examples of that would be a home office or internet sales or website design, for instance. You don't really have people coming over to the house for a service. You can do this. You're working for a company, maybe an insurance agency, and you can do all your work from home. And for whatever reason you want to apply for a home-based business, or if you have an LLC or something like that for tax purposes, you probably want a home occupancy permit. Low-impact uses example, these are just hypotheticals like dog groomers, tax accountants, attorneys. And there would also be then a set of rules, like what's in the code right now, that would govern those low-impact uses. And then we would have, on the bottom, that's just the accessory use, where you have the zoning districts across the top, and then we have the no impact would be permitted by right, and then the low impact uses would be limited uses where they're allowed, but you need to meet these standards. So that's option A and B, and then option, what's the next? Oh, so I guess there are only two options that we're pitching here, but so I guess just for discussion purposes, I don't know if you're in favor of just use-based standards and just focusing on here's the list and here's the standards, or if you want to get into here's a no-impact list of uses, here's a low-impact list of uses with standards. And then we could talk about, in any of these options, we can talk about, if you think our list of uses is too basic, if you want to expand upon it to introduce other ideas like animal grooming, pet sitters, massage therapy, car cleaning, hair, beauty. Should certain uses need a permit at all? Like a home office, do we want to be issuing a permit for someone that's purely just,
My concern, Steve, is like internet sales.
Yeah.
If you're selling out of your house, you're storing things in your house, you're getting deliveries to and from,
Yeah.
or shipping from your house. Is the incoming traffic and outgoing traffic, with whether it's UPS or FedEx or whatever, is that going to be upsetting to the neighbors? I mean, if you have UPS stops once a day, that's not a big deal. But if you got UPS stopping and Amazon stopping and FedEx and DHL and everybody else, yeah, that can be irritating, I can see, on
Yeah.
a regular basis. I mean, everybody gets deliveries, but,
Yeah.
are
Yeah,
you-
it's the hard part. It's like, how do you quantify what's acceptable and not acceptable? I went home
It's a
for
tipping point.
went
Is
home
the
for lunch
garage
today.
packed full
Yeah.
of packages?
Right.
And what can you sell? I mean,
Right.
I'll tell you right, there's a guy in the 4th District that sells guns. He has ammunition and guns, and,
Well, that we can't regulate.
We
if I
can't
understand.
regulate it.
Yeah. What about
but
fireworks?
it's irritating to his neighbors, you know?
Mr. Chair, I get that with the deliveries, but I guess that's no different than a shopaholic. I got a neighbor across the street that Amazon and UPS is there once, bare minimum, twice a day. They're not running a business. I think she just really likes to shop, but, if it's limited use, it wouldn't go in front of the council, right? We would say, you have to do this, these are the guidelines, you're good to go. Only conditional would have to go in front of the common council
Yes.
for a review.
That's correct. Yeah, the limited use, it's if it meets the conditions that we have specifically outlined in the code, then it's a permitted use. That's how the limited use functions. Then it functions, it's governed like a permitted use after that point, once it passes those conditions.
What's preventing someone from getting a delivery with LTL Freight-Line?
I don't think anything.
I mean,
No, nothing. You might get furniture delivered in a
yeah,
big truck.
I mean,
Well,
and
and
which
that's
is no
maybe where
problem, but if you're,
everything should be limited
if
use.
you're
where
doing it
we
on a regular
outline.
basis, I mean, I can see where that would be irritating.
Yeah. And so if, I guess if you go back
Like
to
if you're
that.
doing a dog sitter.
Can you go back
it'd
to
be
the
different
permit?
If someone's watching their neighbor's dog for a fee, or they're watching 8 dogs that are barking in
Oh,
a
yeah,
backyard.
that's different, yeah.
It's different than, a dog walker bringing a dog over, or pet sitter even
Yep.
for the day, having 2 even dogs or 8 dogs.
Yeah.
Same like music lessons. I mean, do you want 8 kids playing a trumpet and figuring it out next door? I don't know. Do we limit that to,
Yeah.
3 per session?
One is enough.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair, if I may add, now, when we look at these home occupations that we may want to include or not include. And every one of them, with the exception of car cleaning, really would have oversight, and pet sitters, of course, would have oversight of a health department. There's criteria, and that was the thing that I was talking about. If I open up a business in West Dallas, I have to sign off in 5 departments. If you're doing that in a home, that should be, somebody should be seeing what's happening within those walls. And if you're looking at animal grooming, we can say it can go to, oh, well, I cut a couple dogs' hair a week, or whatever the case is. We're talking, my business, if I'm cutting hair and I'm doing a home operating business, I'm gonna do it the same as if I have a brick and mortar. I'm gonna go one after the other for 8 hours in that day. And do my neighbors want one after the other on the half hour to the hour? Same thing with dog groomers. And we have to really look at the totality of it. These aren't just businesses that saying, hey, just come on over to the house, I'm gonna, trim up your dog or do the toenails. They're actually running businesses. That's my concern. And no neighbor wants to deal with that traffic constantly. And the lack of oversight, I think that really matters.
Okay.
If you have the health department coming into a dog grooming shop, why are we allowing it in the home and not having that oversight?
So what I'm hearing is, if we can, with some of these more intensive home occupations, if we could have we can talk with building inspections and see if this is feasible and, what their kind of thoughts are on this as well. But if there's kind of higher intensity home occupations, maybe considering having some inspections at those, just like our business occupancy permits are processed like that, is what you're thinking.
Right, like a no impact, I don't think someone who just sits at home, doesn't get a lot of deliveries, I wouldn't think a permit is really, no one's knowing, like, to your point, you could drive by, you could have a neighbor next door, you really don't know.
Yeah.
So I like the idea of no impact and then low impact, and then adding on to low impact specifications of, if it's required, to Suzette's point, in a building, then it should be required in your home. My personal thought on it, I wouldn't be against it, someone, having a massage therapy place next door or things like that, but it would just have to be regulated, because, well, massage therapy doesn't do good in brick and mortar, now you put it in your home, but,
Yeah, that's even worse.
I like to say that the state with the,
There's no oversight.
the state with the hairdressers and barbershop and all that, years ago, they used to have an inspector used to come around
Right.
to check all the permits, all the business in, say, West Dallas throughout the state. But now they never come around for the last over 20 years. They seize that. See, so to me, talking about, I agree, Alderperson Christian, about some of the people cutting hair at home. But I'll say this, that's pretty hard, really, for somebody, really the city of building inspection, to oversee that, to control that. You have to have an amount of transit or traffic, really, to see that it's a big business. But when somebody's got 4 or 5 people, say, showing up, a woman or a guy, to get their hair done in an address, that's pretty hard to control.
So
that.
we can report back to you guys, I guess, too.
Yeah,
we
it
can talk to building inspections and see what their thoughts
Yeah,
are
that's
about
fine.
doing
I
home
mean, that's-
occupation
It's
inspections.
not a right thing to do, but a lot of people do that, I agree with that.
Alderman Rowe, I think you were saying something.
Sticking with Alderman Grisham's point of view with the dog grooming, you could be doing a lot of dogs and then drop them off in the morning, and then they're out in the backyard until 5 o'clock when the owners come and get them, so you have to be careful there
and some
too.
could do that, most grooming shops, they don't board the dogs during the day, they go one by one, and then you come pick up your dog, but that's just the example of what the flow of traffic would be. So it's the same when you go to a barber shop, one's in the chair, one's outside waiting, and it's gonna be that transition all day long. But yes, there
Right.
could be some
I can't get mine till 6
unregulated
o'clock
that would
tonight.
say, okay,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
you're going shopping for 3 hours, don't worry, I'll keep
I know,
Fifi in the
and
backyard.
all of a sudden you got 4 dogs in the backyard, and
Yeah.
they're all after the same
I
squirrel or
think-
whatever.
Overall, it's problematic.
I could say just on that, you don't keep the dogs, if you're a dog groomer, in the backyard where they can get dirty after they've just been groomed. Usually you keep them inside. That's how that goes.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
So on the permits and inspections,
Yeah.
annual inspections,
Oh, yeah, I mean, that,
That's a good point. That'd be something we'd want
Yeah.
to bring
Right,
up with
and the
building inspectors
Permit
as well.
fee should cover the cost of the inspection.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
so if we're sending in somebody from bins, and we're sending in somebody from fire, and we're sending in somebody in from health, I gotta figure that's at least $100. That's
Oh,
gotta
yeah.
be $35 a throw to get a body in there, right? A professional in there
Easy.
for a half hour on a scheduled time or something like that. So I wanna make sure that we're recovering our costs here. And to Alderperson Gresham's point, on the hair washing thing, I mean, I imagine they keep detailed, no, oh, you know what, I'm just gonna cut hair. Or we'll stay in the dog room. I'm gonna stay in the dog room. Well, business is good, and I was doing them in my bathtub. Well, now I converted that into like a little,
My second bedroom that I
yeah, and I tiled out this thing here now, and it's more like a little doggy shower. So I imagine the inspections would stay on top of that to make sure that that's all
yeah,
correct.
I think we have to, I'm gonna run this past inspections too, because I don't wanna
Overburden certain
put them out there on
departments.
an
Yes.
annual basis if
Yeah.
they're not prepared to do so,
I guess I'd like to see, I'd like to see it on an annual basis.
Yeah.
Where do we draw the line on what kind of business you can have in your house? Because I remember
That was-
Ed
I was just
Ed
gonna ask
Lozinski talking about one of his neighbors runs like a printing shop in his basement. And he's got
Oh,
trucks coming to deliver paper, he's got UPS coming to pick up the packages every day,
Yeah, I could
multiple
see that.
times. So, I mean,
Yeah, and I was just gonna ask you guys that for your kind of guidance on this too. Like, so we have this list of our 6 kind of categories right now in option A on the right. That's what we have currently. How would you feel about including? I mean, some of these other uses that we have here listed there. Do we want to expand it more than what we have currently, or do we want to kind of keep it as it is? What kind of direction do
I
you
would
want to go with
keep
that?
it as is, personally.
yeah, I don't wanna,
and then
Unless you
I-
included maybe pets.
if they applied for, it, could it go in front of the council? Are we running into issues with that? 'Cause,
No.
I mean,
Yeah, you
to
could-
like some of the feedback we got, a house in between a bar
Yeah.
that has a pet groomer or a massage therapy with more people coming and going isn't as big of a deal if it's someone that's smack dab in the middle of a residential neighborhood, which is a really good point. So could it be, so then with those, if they're not included into that 6, would they apply for a conditional use
So, and this is something.
in-home permit, and then it would go in front of the council, and we could dive more into where do you
that's-
live, what are you doing,
oh,
what are the
no, you
conditions?
don't wanna bring that before the council every time.
What we
That's
could
gonna be a
do,
lot.
there are other options though too, in that we could change. We could think of this as there's three categories of home occupations. There's like the no impact ones, like the offices, which we could say are permitted with you don't even need a permit. You can just do that.
Right.
Then we could have the low impact ones, which are mostly these, which you would need a permit, and potentially if we talking to bins, maybe they would have some sort of inspection or something. And then there could be high impact home occupancies like the dog grooming or pet sitters or whatever, and we would limit those to only commercial districts. So they could only be in the C2, C3, C4 if you're at home in those districts. We could think
okay.
about it that way.
That
It
makes
make more
And then
sense
it, and then
that
it
way.
wouldn't have to go to
Make more
council.
sense.
It wouldn't have to go to council, and it would kind of stay in
That
those
makes more
commercial
sense.
And
areas.
I don't even know if for the low impact, if we just leave those 6 of an art studio, a home baking, I don't even know if inspection would be needed on that.
Okay.
I think inspection would more so be needed on the high impact.
Now, you'd be surprised when you talk art studio.
So it
My
could.
neighbor did welding on,
Yeah, that's
Kiln.
art.
yeah,
Yeah.
it is.
Kiln.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Going back to what you said, Dana, about you don't think it would be an impact if you're, like, I'll take 70th and 71st and National, you got Bronze, you got the house, you've got the health department, you've got my business down the way. If there's another business that opens up in a house, for example, it does impact parking and other things for those businesses as well, where we're already fighting for parking. So you do have to think about such things.
And we could
Well,
we
that's why
can
it would be high impact still, but as a resident, the point of this is in-home, that it doesn't disturb the layout of the neighborhood. Having a few extra cars, really, is it going to be a burden? Yeah. Would it be more of a pain? Yeah, but is it going to impact
Right, I
what's
agree
already
with that
going
as
on
far
there?
as a
No, it's
residence.
not.
It's already a house.
and so one thing too is we could keep the same standards we have for all of these home occupations, and one of the standards right now is that it can't have any off-street parking. They have to, like, if there's of client or something coming to the site, they have to be able to park on the lot, so on somebody's driveway or something. That's a restriction we have right now. So that something like that could still apply to those in commercial districts too.
That would be opening up a can of worms, though. How could you operate a nail salon, a hair salon, or anything like that and expect nobody to park on the street?
Right, you have to have a driveway.
Well,
Yeah.
this is
Have a driveway.
just for a home, just for the home occupation.
Right, but what I'm saying is we're gonna give out this use and it's not gonna be abided by. not-
You're right, it's probably
it's
not.
No.
It's
You're
not.
opening a can
Yeah.
of worms.
The whole first district.
I mean, it's
Exactly.
nice
Anywhere
to have
there's
it-
alleys.
It's going to be
It's,
problematic.
yeah, it's nice to have,
Following up.
yeah, it's nice to have it in
So we
writing,
got the
but.
permit, we're legal, boom, nobody's gonna come and look again.
Mr. Chair?
Oh, Michael.
Others, to go back to where other similar as decided by the city,
Oh, yeah.
okay, so approval of the city, who is that?
Yeah, it's the zoning, it's
us.
planning and zoning.
Okay.
Yeah, so.
And so is there an appeals process for that? If you guys say no, is there a way that a citizen could be
They could-
heard by?
Yeah, they go to the Board of Review.
Board-
Board of
so
Appeals,
that-
they go to the
and
Board of
then-
Appeals, yeah.
That's the Board of Appeal,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
that's what-
appeals.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that if an individual on your staff makes a decision that a citizen's not happy with, that they still can be heard. I'm not trying to say make a bunch of work for somebody else, but I just want to make sure there's an appeals
Right.
process.
Okay. I think,
So yeah, look at no impact, low impact, high impact, have those stipulations. And again, I mean, I guess,
Annual inspection, annual permit, impacts on our staffing.
Yeah, I think
That's why you
that's
gotta-
the big questions. We can talk to
Big
Bins
question.
about that, and then we'll also just look into how could we do this in the commercial districts with those higher impact ones where they would have, basically, they have a client coming. That's kind of when it becomes a higher impact, I think.
Well,
So-
you know, what are we trying to do with this? You're not trying to encourage people to run a business out of their home. You're trying to accommodate people that have the need to have a small office or something in their home and do a business. If I want to go to a barber, I'm going to go to a barber that's got a commercial shop
Right.
that I know I can see everything, it's clean, I know how it's operated. I'm not going to go to some business that somebody's doing out of their house.
And I agree with that because I think what we're doing is we're encouraging those people to do
Yeah,
business. out of
we got a lot of empty storefronts, let's fill them up,
Right.
you know?
So
Okay.
I wouldn't really even look at that high impact
Okay.
in the category that you have right now. I wouldn't even consider
So
that.
we'll take we'll take a measure of the room then. So how many people would be in favor, I guess, of going forward with the kind of no impact, low impact, and not doing those kind of more higher impact where some client might be
me.
there?
So that's option B is what you're saying, right?
Right.
Yeah, option
Yeah,
B
option B.
essentially, yeah.
okay.
Okay, and then would some people be in favor of allowing some of those higher impact in commercial areas?
In commercial areas, yes.
in
Okay.
commercial areas,
Okay.
there's
I think
obviously
that's the way to go,
stipulations.
but
Okay,
Commercial
so we have a
areas,
kind of a
Zach, I
little
didn't
bit
know
of
what
a
I was voting on. I thought I was voting on option A or option B.
Oh, I see
What
what
are
you're
you,
saying.
what are we
So,
voting on?
good call. We've kind of adjusted a little bit. So I guess it's option B is kind of what we're looking at.
Not that B. That B?
I guess kind of this is what the basis is essentially, and then would we also allow? Would we do B or B plus the higher impact in the commercial areas?
Commercial, I don't have a problem in the commercial.
In commercial, yes.
Commercial,
Only-
that's
Residential,
fine.
no.
Okay.
Commercial, I have no problem.
Inspection
With inspections.
and
Yeah.
obviously other limitations. I mean, I still think that we need to state of a pet sitter, even though it's high impact, that there's still regulations on it, that it's not pet sitting for 8. Even if it's in commercial, it's pet sitting for this limit, and we set certain limits.
Okay.
Okay.
Would the dog thing fall under the same regulation with 3 and with a fancier's license or
That's a
a
good question.
fancier?
Um,
Is it 3 or 5?
They don't own it. 4 is
I
the
think it's over,
maximum.
is it 4?
Is it
over
4?
4?
If you have, if you have more than 2, you need a fancier.
Fanciers, and you can go to 4 max.
Go up to 4 max.
Unless there's puppies under a certain age.
Yeah, right, 5 months. And, yeah, but a groomer, that wouldn't count because the fancier only counts for ownership.
Oh, okay.
So going back to the high impact in commercial, then we'd have, as our Alderman Boyko said, a review once a year in-home. And
Inspection.
inspection, and that would be
Like if you're
what we
doing
would
any
do if we
business.
open up a business.
Yeah.
Right.
We'll talk to Bins about that to see if it's feasible for them. We can kind of
'Cause if
We
it's
can
not,
kind of
we take
draft
it
a-
off the table, I think.
Yes.
We can draft a plan for this and talk to Bins and give you guys an update and kind of a new outline of what our proposal for this will be. We can kind of do that specifically.
Yeah, I guess it'd be nice to know what the impact would be. I mean, I'm sure you must have a list someplace and, of all the occupancy permits that are out there and what category they would fall in now.
Yeah, and Bins would have to come up with an idea of how many they do a year and what it costs them. Health would also, fire would also,
Yep.
you know, so that they, what it costs to get our staff in there. I don't know that, well, I guess we're not gonna let, we're gonna make fire come every year?
Mr. Chair?
Fire comes every year.
I know it said that, like, low impact is non-nuisance noise. What if a neighbor complains? Is Bins review it? Is it up for review yearly then? We keep those on file, and then when they go to reapply, we say, listen, we had everyone on your block complaining that dogs were barking, or that you're getting 32 shipments in and out a day, and you're taking up parking spots, and you're doing this.
Yeah.
How would that work?
So, I mean, so there's an allegation, right? Somebody's complaining about a nuisance, potentially nuisance home occupancy. I mean, that it's going to take staff time to go out and investigate that. I mean, you know, we can send a notice and order to stop, but I mean, based on what? So I think we have to sort of go out there, and there was that incident, I think in the 4th district some years ago, someone was selling fire sticks or something, you know, some kind of electronic device or something out of there, and there was an allegation of cars night and day showing up at this place to purchase this and then leave, and I think there was some truth to it, but then I think there was some
Exaggeration.
Well,
fluff
that's what I
to
mean.
the
So
to the
if you just have
argument.
someone
Yeah.
that's
It's a
cranky
neighborhood
about
feud.
it, that
Yeah.
They just didn't
doesn't
like
like
each other.
dogs,
Right.
and
Yeah,
then
exactly.
That's one thing.
Flat out didn't like
So I mean,
Yeah.
it obviously has to be legit. I don't want to
Right.
just pull someone because Nancy up the block,
Right.
you know,
That's
yeah, Karen up the block has a
That's-
problem with
yeah.
everything, but you also want to take into but we also have to somewhat acknowledge it because
yeah.
we
Yeah,
don't
the
want it
hard
in this-
part is like just going out there and just trying to observe what the neighbor or what the people that are concerned about it are seeing, and trying to capture that, and then somehow prove that, oh yes, these people that are parking here are legitimately walking into this place to purchase, you know,
Stuff.
goods, and then they're leaving, and this is happening 3 times an hour, you know, throughout the day. So it takes staff time, and
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Chair.
That's the next.
Oh, go ahead.
Couldn't we also, I know health has to get in there, fire has to get in there, inspection has to get in there. Couldn't one guy just do it, one person do that, like
What's, what they're trying to do with. Bins.
cross-train or whatever the
Right.
word is, like a fireman would
Yep.
know.
Yeah.
That's what the city of Milwaukee has
An
done
extra
for
toilet or
years.
what they would be able
It's
to
done by
visually-
neighborhood services. They
Yes.
just have a questionnaire, or not
a
a quick
checklist,
checklist.
yeah.
One checklist that one person goes off to cover all 5 of those
Right,
inspections.
okay, then,
Yeah, that's,
that would be
Yeah.
nice to look into.
yeah, that's something we've worked on for a long time and hasn't happened,
Yeah.
yeah.
What's going on?
I want to go back to.
Gotta hold their feet to the
high
fire.
impact, And I'm just trying to give you guys kind of a knowledge base. When I opened my business, I had to have a state engineer come in and design for vents because of chemicals. Now, and that's just doing a perm, that's doing a color. I could say 95% of my client base was haircutting, but because I said I was going to do a color or a perm, I had to have that vent system in. If we're allowing this in the home, and we're looking at that 5-department sign-off, those same things are going to have to meet the standards in a home that they would have to in a business. So to even entertain the thought of that, think about how many homes, if you're doing hair in a basement or you're doing it in one room, you certainly don't have a vent system because a bathroom vent isn't going to do it. So I think we're opening up a situation that really isn't going to be regulated in the ways it needs to when you're looking at that specific business. Pet groomers, maybe it's a little different because they're not
People
using
dye their pets'
chemicals.
hair.
Pardon?
Dye their pets' hair.
Seen it.
Well,
Really?
maybe, but if you want to
Fly
put it in
around.
that
Totally
category,
done
then
for bulldogs.
you're dealing with the same thing, but you're not using
Yeah.
usually caustic
But then when
chemicals.
we
You might
put that
use
in the
Kool-Aid too.
sign off, that you
Do
must
that.
have this type of venting, and if it's not, then you don't get your business.
Yeah.
If you can't afford to do the venting, then you don't get your business
Right.
in your home. So it would almost help to eliminate some of those that think they're going to, if we know what is all needed on that, and it's part of the checklist that gets checked, and you don't have it, then you don't get to cut it.
Just like a kiln has to be vented.
Well, if I was gonna do that, I'd just say, well, I'm not dying anybody's here, I'm just,
Yeah,
just-
I'd
styling
say
it.
that.
yeah,
You'd say that, but you wouldn't do that.
right,
Yeah.
exactly.
I think,
I have a question on the home baking.
yeah.
I didn't know it was legal to sell
So that's actually,
commercial.
it wasn't,
Goods.
there was actually, there was recently a new law passed, and we were, a new state law.
Really?
And we were made aware of it, and so, yeah, we have
So
to incorporate that now.
You don't need a commercial kitchen anymore?
You don't need a commercial kitchen, but I think this is really low. It's supposed to be low impact, low key. I mean, we're not talking Carrie's Krispies here. I guess that where you're
Well,
having
that's what
retail
that's what's
customers.
concerning
I think it's
I
the
mean-
product, it's not refrigerated products. Is that where the line is
Baked-
drawn? Can't
yeah.
have like custards in it, things that require refrigeration?
Yeah, it's
I-
very
I-
just dried, baked goods. It's that
Cookies.
like cookies, brownies, those types of things. And once you start getting into, I think, more complicated things that spoil, I
Yes.
think you cross the line. So yeah.
I'd
It's
be
called the
worried
cottage
about
food law.
sanitation too.
Yeah, that's where it comes from. Yeah, cookies never, no cookie is gonna kill you.
Well, my wife makes cookies. I mean, what's
Listen,
what's the
Yeah, she
problem
makes
with it?
pretty good ones too.
So we'll get back to you.
Very
We will
good
report
ones.
back on the home occupation stuff. Give you guys an update with a newer plan. And
There's some more information.
yeah, there's some more info we need, and then some more kind of input you guys can get.
Conversations, right, once
Yeah.
that
Okay.
info is found
Yep.
out.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I was going to say something in reference of some of the small business, like I say, at the hairdressers. You know, I would like to see really the if it would be a percentage. How many people are really doing cutting at home? Really, I mean, how can we find out?
More than
I mean, to me, it'd be kind of hard. I don't want to put more staff adding, more people, really, to find out what. Because many people, they won't open the doors. You have to have a warrant to go inside the,
Well, then you don't get a permit. And
Well,
you don't get to run a
permit-
business, so don't
They
open
do
your
it
door.
anyway. I think what Vince is saying
yeah,
is.
that's what I'm saying. I mean,
that are barbers or
Yeah.
hairstylists, I'll bet you
Not gonna apply for it
99,
anyway. We don't
know what's going
99% of them do work in their homes for their friends or
that's
relatives.
right. See, that,
Vince probably cuts his wife's hair or
I
whatever.
do cut my wife's hair.
Our
I
hair
have
braiding
two
is
brothers, a
huge.
cousin. I cut their hair.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't charge them, but just the
Right, but
idea
when
is,
When
Yeah.
you're doing it for
yeah. I mean, I don't do for
charge,
yeah.
Yeah,
I can say I have
correct. And I think
family
that's,
coming in
that's
too.
that's the
And to me,
difference.
it's a
Vince.
hard
Yeah.
task, really, for the city to kind of work on something like that. You know, it's a real difficult.
You're right,
really.
Vince. I mean, it's
It's
not
very
easy.
difficult, really.
Yeah,
it's
those
not.
same people
Yeah.
probably aren't going to apply and go through it all anyways.
No, they're not.
just gonna keep
They're just doing
what
it for a
they're
couple of friends and that's it. It's not a business.
See, the state, I mean, you have to get a license and you kind of,
daughter comes
they're
over
the
and
watchdog, but they don't do anything, really. The state doesn't do anything anymore. They
This
just
is more
issue.
so, I think, prompted about
Yeah, but this isn't about
people
the state.
posting on Facebook and
Yes.
West Dallas News and Events saying,
Yes.
hey, I got
It's business.
a business, come get your nails done, come
Right.
get your hair done,
Yep.
come
Yeah,
get this
exactly.
done. And clearly they are running a business.
Yeah,
and
that's
it's not
right.
just
See,
cutting
that's,
Right,
your nephew's
that
hair,
way,
your
100%,
wife's hair.
yes.
right. That's the problem.
yes, that's a problem.
And you've seen more and more of it, and even to the points where they show pictures and they legit got the chair and the water hose and all the nails on one whole wall.
Yeah.
So basically, like a spare bedroom was turned into a little nail studio with the lights and the tables and the pedicure things and everything. So that's where I think more so this is
I do too. I
geared towards.
gotta stop that or regulate it
Because
anyway.
to your point, we have small businesses we can fill, that's where we're going to go with it.
All right, so switching gears a little bit. This is something that right now, next up we're gonna be talking about housing. Right now, we don't have any changes related to housing within the code. We just wanted to get your guidance on, these are some kind of new trends that are, new kind of trends that are happening across the country, and we wanna stay on top of these things. So we are gonna kind of give you guys some options for some changes in where housing can be allowed in the city. And we're just gonna run through this quick here. So, a kind of modern zoning best practice is to allow more of this, what's called missing middle housing. It's kind of these kind of mid-size housing things. So it's duplexes, maybe 3 and 4 unit apartments is really what we're talking about. It's often not legal to build these in large amounts of America's residential land. So in West Dallas, over half of our land that's zoned for residential uses, you cannot build these. It's basically single family only. And there's, been, people have started to notice some problems with, single family only districts. They kind of artificially constrain the housing supply by inflating housing costs, encourages sprawl, discourages density. It can limit the opportunity for property owners for what they can do with their property. Can reinforce kind of economic divisions. Some areas, people with less money can't get into. It can prevent building, what some people might see as desirable neighborhoods and building types. So more American cities are kind of turning to this European model where you allow a greater mix of housing types in more neighborhoods. And there's some benefits to this. Could be more taxable value, encourages more density. Having more housing units means that your population can grow more, gives more choice in the housing market. So it's kind of a free market kind of approach to this. So what we just wanted to take a look at and get your input on is how these, we wanted to look at how these concepts could work in West Dallas and kind of get the guidance of you guys of which way you'd want to take this. So first off is the no change option. This is just what we have right now. So the missing middle type housing is allowed in our RB and RC districts only, which is in the blue on that graph up on the right there. That's where duplexes are allowed. And this again is where 3 and 4 unit apartments are allowed. So it's mostly on the east side of the city and central side of the city. On the bottom, you'll see our zoning table. So 1 unit dwellings are permitted uses in RA1 and 2 unit dwellings are limited uses in RA1. This is a very rare limitation. It only applies to properties that share or basically bordering a commercial property. So it's only a very select few of RA properties are allowed to be duplexes. But essentially, duplexes and 3 to 4 unit apartments aren't allowed in any of the RA districts is what we're looking at. So the first option is the biggest change. This would just be an extension where we would allow duplexes in all of the residential zoning districts, including those RA districts. So this map on the right would show where those duplexes could be. This map would show where the 3 to 4 unit buildings could be. This would be allowed in RA3 in this option, and it would be allowed in RA2, just similar to how duplexes were allowed before, where it would have to be next to a commercial property, but it would not be allowed in RA1 to keep that kind of, neighborhood character the same. One thing that, from a zoning perspective, the form and function of a duplex and a single unit dwelling are pretty much the same. They look pretty much the same. They function pretty much the same. So that's just why we would allow those in RA1, but not the 3 to 4 unit building. So the second option is a little bit less big of a change. This is extending the missing middle housing with some limitations. So this would essentially allow them as permitted uses in the RA3 district, and it would allow duplexes, I should say. And then there would be some specific limitations for duplexes that might be a little bit more than what they are now, but could be kind of changed to fit however we want to go with it. So it has to be within maybe 100 feet of a commercial district, so something maybe a little bit more than what we currently have, or it could just kind of stay the same. And then we would allow 3 to 4 unit dwellings just a little bit more in those districts if they're bordering commercial properties. And then the third option is the least the smallest change. This would be a partial extension. It would really focus on our RA3 district. The RA3 district, I'm just going to flip forward, already has a lot of duplexes that are now non-conforming uses. They were probably built before the zoning code was changed. So a lot of these neighborhoods kind of already have a mix of single family and duplexes. So what we would propose in this third option is to allow duplexes as a permitted use in RA3, which would increase that conformance. And we'd also allow a select number of the 3 to 4 unit apartments where it basically would have to be bordering a commercial property. So in summary, we're going to go through to here. So there's kind of 4 ways we could take this kind of change in housing. We could keep it the same as it is right now, where the RA districts are really just single family homes. We could extend the 2 unit dwellings, the duplexes, and the kind of small apartments, 3 to 4 units. We could extend those pretty large extension in option A, where they'd be permitted, duplex would be permitted all the way through all of our residential districts, and you'd have a little bit more flexibility for those 3 to 4 unit apartments, but it wouldn't be allowed in most of our RA1 or RA2. Then there's the RAB, which is a little bit less big of a change that would kind of allow, allow those duplexes in RA3, but not much elsewhere. It would just be kind of a limited, a slight extension. And then option C is the smallest change. It's only would be in RA3, and it would be kind of intended more as a way to promote the conformance of those duplexes. So now that we've kind of summarized these 4 different options, I guess, what are your thoughts? Do you guys have any questions? Which way would you guys want to take this? Keep it the same, change it a little bit?
We had problems on the East End years ago, and I don't know if it's still a problem, with people converting their single-family homes into duplexes. With
Illegal.
It's illegal. Can we make it legal? Should it be legal?
No.
I think
I
if
don't
it
know.
conforms to the building codes and the standards,
Yeah, I don't see any problem
So-
with it, really.
As long as they apply for
I think
permits.
the issue is ownership versus rental.
Rental.
Yes.
Yeah.
And Mr. Chair.
That's where it changes. And I think we've talked about this, I don't know if this is a committee or a different committee, about some way of encouraging owner-occupied duplexes. I think, as alderman, I think
I don't know how you do
most
that.
of my issues are with absentee landlords. But when the landlord lives there, and I don't know how much of that we have yet, and my anecdotal evidence is that we're having less owner-occupied,
Right.
fewer owner-occupied duplexes, and most of them, they're moving in that direction. And that's a trend I'd like to reverse. I don't think any of these trends, anything here is gonna reverse that trend. No, nothing here is gonna help that.
No.
And that's where you get back to the pride of ownership, where, people take care of their own homes better. I'm not against rentals, but I don't know about, I certainly would not want to see option A, just allow duplexes anywhere. I think, though, if somebody's gonna make the investment in a bigger house, I think family sizes on general are shrinking.
I'm thinking
not sure.
condos, if somebody wants to build a side-by-side townhouse.
Yeah.
As condos. What's wrong with that?
Would we allow that now? We allow that.
As long as it, I guess, meets the
That-
bulk
Well,
requirements of
where
setbacks.
do we
New
allow it?
construction.
Right now, if you had side-by-side condos on the same lot, you're saying, is that?
Yep.
That would not be allowed in most of our RA
That's what I
districts.
Considered a duplex.
It would be considered a duplex. It
Even
would
if
have to. It would have to be immediately next to a commercial property for it to do that. So it would not be allowed right now.
Yeah, it's currently allowed in
I
our
don't have a problem
RB
with those.
districts.
Yeah, it's
Right.
allowed in the east
Condos,
side.
Yeah.
So the issue is more the owner occupancy. Is what
Yes,
you're-
it's the owner occupancy thing, and certainly the 3s and 4s are way less likely to have
yeah.
an owner there. I've mentioned this before, my family's start up the ladder, started with a duplex on 38th and Lloyd.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Holy moly.
Is that a
Is it-
possum?
I thought it was a dog.
Awesome.
Wow, he's
I could take him home.
Those are
He
cool.
does look like Papa John's.
You can cook them up. Hey, Larry, you can take it to the restaurant. Make a nice soup.
dinner time, yeah.
I'm sorry for interrupting.
That thing
My,
was-
my family's beginning started with a duplex, economic, coming here from Germany. They started with a duplex on like 38th and Lloyd, and that was the beginning. But evenally, it got
Most-
sold.
yeah, most
It got-
of them do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean,
So, yeah, I mean, I think our strategic plan or vision had called, maybe had an idea of about offering an incentive
Some
for
sort of
owner
incentive for that.
occupancy.
That's a different issue.
different issue, a different incentive, but I mean, this would be, do you want to maybe increase the intensity of?
Same one.
Is he doing laps?
Pacing,
Density.
yeah.
Maybe they like us, eh?
So easily distracted.
Yeah, you're interesting, Steve, but not as interesting as
That's
this.
more
Awesome.
interesting.
Yeah, and as far as like converting, on the east side and so on, converting a single family to a duplex or vice versa, yeah, it would require a building permit, and
Yeah, I know
any
that,
of our
yeah.
RB districts would be
Yeah.
okay as long as you have a permit to do so, yeah.
It would be expensive.
okay, so the issue was, it wasn't permitted, it was that they weren't getting permits.
Right.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Just happening.
So my question it is, if, like Alderperson Weigel mentioned about owner occupy, but I'm sure there is some ruling laws, if the guy, he built that or he purchased, it's been happened, they live there a couple of years or so, then
Sell it, yeah.
they sell it. So there's no laws where he can
Rent it out,
refrain
No.
anybody really from doing that,
No, you
really.
can't.
I mean, there's no laws,
No.
really.
Free game?
Yeah,
to
so
stop
I think like from my understanding from a policy way, there's not, you can't, create a law that forces people to live in a
No.
duplex.
Yeah, see,
if they own
that's-
it, but
so
you can
I-
encourage it by, incentives or
Or give them a
So the-
loan based on
So on the
occupancy.
east end, over 90% is all rental, I mean, non-owner occupied, really. Over 90%, I bet you that's what it is. Never used to be like that, but now it is. I mean,
Okay, so I guess I think we have a good sense of the room here. We're just gonna go through them and vote, just so we have a clear direction. So all in favor of the no change option, raise your hand.
Yeah, it's probably me, no change right now.
I'll change it.
Option A.
I'm actually on the bolder end of this. I'm really in favor of higher density, a free market approach to housing, and as one of the only, if not renter on the council, I think having more housing options is beneficial to our city.
Okay.
More money, more people, more business, etc.
Okay. Option B. And then option C. Okay, 2 for option C. Okay, that's helpful for us to
Okay.
know. We can move on. Tony?
All right, so
Oh,
this next change, we're also gonna be presenting a few different options for you all. But we're talking about automotive uses in the C2 district. So the only two automotive uses that are allowed in C2 are fuel sales and motor vehicle service. So there are 25 gas stations within the city of West Allis and 45 motor vehicle service shops. And just for context, the C2 district, it's intended for a mix of uses in close proximity to residential areas that are compatible with the neighborhood scale. And currently, fuel sales and motor vehicle service is a conditional use in the C2 district. We've had some neighbors call recently about some gas stations that were going in that were in opposition based on the noise and fumes and lighting that gas stations are. So first option, we're going to start from lowest impact to highest impact and go to highest impact. So doing nothing. Important to note that gas stations and motor vehicle services heavily use the C2 district, locate themselves within the C2 district. So 46% gas stations and 56% motor vehicle service. Option A, we're proposing to not, for these uses to not be allowed in C2 if they share a lot line with the residentially zoned property. So that would make 20% of, roughly 20% of these businesses non-conforming. Option B would, it's similar to option A, but with the nuance of they're not allowed if they're separated by an alley. So if we have gas station, alley, home, then it would not be allowed. And that would make roughly 40% of these businesses non-conforming. And then the most impactful option here is to remove these uses from C2 entirely, which would again affect 46% of gas stations and 56% of motor vehicle service. And here's just a summary of all 4 of the options. So,
What was option B again? Could you go back to that slide?
yeah, that one's a little bit confusing. It's very similar to option A, except that we're now including all properties that border an alleyway.
Or border an alleyway with residential. So it's a kind of a nuanced. It's just a slight
So it can't
tweak.
be in an
It's a
alley
slight.
and on a residential?
Yeah. So the difference between A and B is really just a slight tweaking in the language that would change it from in option A 20% would be non-conforming, and option B 40% would be non-conforming. The intent though for both of them is, considering restricting those uses if they're near residential use is the idea. It's just two ways of phrasing it that would impact more of these kind of automotive uses, in one wording than the other. That's
The non-conforming is the same as how it has been before, where the folks that are doing it now are grandfathered in. If they sell the business, the same business can go in if it's within 12 months
Yep.
of that sale. After 12 months, then it can no longer be
Right.
that
Yeah,
business, type of
Then the new
business,
law
right?
kicks in, right?
No, but
Yeah.
then it becomes a conditional use, meaning if somebody else after 12 months wants to open up a gas station there, then it can become before our council, and our council can say, oh yeah, you can, with a vote.
Is that what it is?
That's if we don't change it. Our plan would be to make it a limited use. So what that means is it's a little different than a conditional use. So a limited use is if it meets that restriction, if it's okay, if it fits within our rules, it's a permitted use. If it doesn't fit within the rules, it's not permitted at all. So then what that would be is say a gas station in our C2 district closes down. 2 years later, another gas station wants to come in. They realize that they come in. We notice that it shares a lot line with the residential property. Then that would mean it's not permitted at all. So these are possible strategies to limit how much automotive uses can be concentrated in that C2 district and kind of force them to spread out a little bit more. That's the intention behind it. They would not be conditional uses in that district anymore.
But it says C all across there.
That is a typo. Well, it's. Sorry, that's not a typo. I misexplained it. If they meet the restrictions, they would be a conditional use. Sorry, it wouldn't be permitted. That's my bad. They would be a conditional use. They'd still have to go through the same processes that any gas station would have to go through. So if it meets that restriction, it's allowed as a conditional use. If it doesn't meet it, then it's not permitted. That's how I should have explained
Can
it.
you go to option B? I just wanted to read it again.
Mr. Chair?
You gotta go back.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah.
I think our gas stations are so much more than that. They have become the de facto corner store for a lot of people. And I'm not that I'm pro gas station or pro automobile. I mean, I'm not anti-automobile necessarily. But the gas station for a lot of people is really good. They walk to get a gallon of milk, or they buy their cigs, or not many of them sell bananas or fresh fruit, I guess, but they are,
Yep, milk, bread,
they
sandwich, soda.
I actually
Water.
legit do my
And when I think of
grocery
the auto
shopping, quick
repair,
trip
the auto
sometimes.
repair guy, the guy I go to, part of the reason I go to him is because I can drop my car off and walk back. He is, to me, my auto repair place is a neighborhood business. Hopefully I don't have to see him that often. But I think there's a value to that. That's we're back in that density conversation where I can walk to the businesses and services that I need, maybe not weekly or even monthly, but it's an important thing to me that I can walk. Clearly, you can buy gas anywhere you want, but if the gas station, and how many gas stations today only sell gas or only even have auto-related stuff? I don't think I can think of any of them that aren't selling other stuff.
Right.
So, I guess, and honestly, I think in 20 years, this is a lot of long view stuff.
Right.
Yep.
I think in 20 years, there's gonna be fewer gas stations.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I'm charging my car. When I go to bed, my car's gonna charge itself. If I'm still here in 20 years. So, if we're looking at the long view, which is what all of this is about, the long view, I don't know how important this managing of the, and I'm gonna go back to the auto repair place,
That's a
there's
different
skilled-
story, though.
but the auto repair places, at least the ones I go to, there's skilled guys working there. They're not parking the cars on the street. They're not violating all the terms of the special. The problems we have are typically they have the doors open on a.
Yeah,
they're
that's
working
mostly in the
at
First
10
District and-
p.m. on a Saturday night, or they're maybe doing stuff they're not supposed to do. Maybe a little body work on the side and all that. That's a matter of enforcement and all that other stuff. But
Well, but it's hard on a lot of those little shops. They can't be out there
no,
every day.
no, and that's
And,
Yeah.
and in the summertime, it gets hot inside the shops, the guys open the
Guys,
doors.
yeah, even if it
It's very,
says, I know,
very noisy.
I know we approve them with, doors gotta be closed when they're working.
I know, but that's,
But we
it never happens.
No, never.
Never happens. So I agree with you on the service stations, the repair shops. I think we should regulate them. If they're next to a residential, I think that should stay in.
Because by definition, but again, like I said, and I guess most of them run a shuttle service, right? At least the ones that are connected to dealerships.
Oh, yeah, they all.
But I think a lot of little, whether they're mom and pops or whatever you wanna call it, I think a lot of our small business owner, they don't have a guy sitting around to drive me back home.
No.
No, so,
But they have a car you can borrow typically.
Yeah, I was gonna say,
Yeah.
sometimes like that little beater you
a
can.
beater for
yeah.
a loaner, yeah,
Yeah.
I had that one time, it was a beater.
Hey, Marty, don't you have any connections? I mean, gonna give you a
So
ride
what were
home?
the
I mean,
options about A, B, C, and no?
So,
Yeah, you can go back to that last bit. And we could do this part by part too. We could take it first for fuel sales and then for
Yeah, okay.
and then for auto repair. We can do them separately. But Tony,
What do you guys recommend?
We-
I'd
we
like to know
don't-
that.
We don't recommend option C. We don't think we should. That's just our staff general consensus.
And you're saying gas but I think we should
want to
break out
remove them entirely.
Yeah.
gas stations and repairs separate.
Yeah,
yeah,
yes,
we can we can take them separately. I think yeah. I think. we
Wait,
don't
I still want to hear what they
recommend either.
recommend though, please.
I would pick A or B would be, I guess, A being the less intense, because it's just if you're a budding residential. B gets a little bit more intensive because in some cases then you have the alley as a separator between the commercial and the residential, but you're only 15 feet away from that auto repair use, for instance,
Can you
so.
think of an example with the alley?
Sure.
76th and Lincoln.
Yeah, like
spots.
76th and Lincoln, what do we got
60th
here?
and-
That was gas station, right?
Yeah, 2 gas stations there, the one on the.
Yeah.
It's pretty common
southeast
along
corner.
Lincoln Avenue where there's
Yeah.
there's a lot of
Oh,
there's
yeah.
the alley and then there's a residence right behind it.
Behind the alley, yeah.
Another one might be like Pope Automotive on 105th and, Greenfield. There's an alley that separates the,
Yep.
that might be a situation.
So the alley one is A then, correct?
B.
No, that's B.
Oh, B, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So
I
do-
prefer A.
Alright, so for fuel sales, we'll go first.
yeah, fuel sales first. All right, so no change to fuel sales. So continue to allow them in C2 unrestricted or just as conditional uses.
Yep, no change.
So raise your hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Is there any that are just automotive gas stations? When I was a kid, I could think of some.
Oh, yeah,
But I
not
can't
anymore.
picture any now that.
Me either.
A gas station that only sells auto related, you might get a fuel filter there or a gallon or a quart of oil.
Yeah.
But I think all of them sell something.
Joe's Service at 75th and National.
Joe Phelan.
Yeah.
That was the last that I
But all of them now have sandwiches
Or the old
or
place.
soda
Yeah, they all
or
have
milk
everything.
or something.
Just auto repair.
So continuing on for fuel sales, this is now fuel sales option A. So this is the small restriction where, if it's across an alley, they could still do it. But if it's just sharing a lot line, then no. So anybody for this one? No? Okay. Then this is fuel sales again. Option B, including the alley, anybody? No? Okay. And then C, for fuel sales. So just completely remove it from C2. 0, okay. I must
Not
have
everybody raised their
miscounted.
hand for the.
I guess I think we missed one person, but I wasn't sure if they were gonna vote again. But okay, auto repair.
Unanimous.
I guess. Yeah. Okay.
Can I ask one question? So like this gas station on this corner, it abuts an alley and a residential property.
Yeah, there's a lot of them that do
Yeah.
that.
So what you're saying is the alley's behind it?
If the alley is the thing that separates them,
Residential,
that's the
yeah.
difference.
Not on the side?
Oh,
On any,
Wouldn't
way.
matter.
Well,
Either-
on
either
any
way.
On any
side.
side.
regardless of, front,
So,
rear,
if-
rear side,
If we
whatever.
were
yeah.
looking at the new gas station that's going in on 84th, and that house that now is gonna be
Right.
coming down, that wouldn't have been permitted if we made that change, because
Right.
they're
Okay,
adjacent
it's
to the
clear.
lot.
I
But that was,
I
I
was
think
just
that
thinking
one
of
was
this one
zone
over
commercial
here.
though. It's about the zoning, not the use,
That
right?
house was
Yep.
zone commercial.
That
so
house was,
that house
84th
was
and,
one. But
was
the one on
it 84th and
84th and
Greenfield or
Beloit.
84th and
That was
Beloit?
zone commercial.
84th and
Beloit was
Greenfield.
commercial
Yep.
too?
It was it's
And
only
the one
the
on
zone.
80, Capri.
So
It's-
then, are we gonna do this again? So auto repair, option A.
Or no change.
This
First.
is
Oh, sorry.
Oh, no change.
Auto
Okay,
repair,
auto
no
re-
change.
Pair was no change? I thought
Or
we
now
voted
now
on
we're
this.
We're
no
voting.
now we're voting again.
Yes.
We're
Yeah.
voting.
Oh, okay.
Voting again. Yeah. So,
Auto repair, no change.
Vince? Okay.
One.
Auto repair, option A.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
Okay. Auto repair, option B.
2.
And auto repair, option C. I think that takes it.
0. Okay.
All right, then, Mr. Chair, I have a question after we vote here. Okay, well, I want to pin you guys down because I didn't understand your answer before. So there's a C after each of those. That means it's a conditional use then, under this new proposal.
Yes.
And a conditional use is the same thing as a special use currently.
Yep.
So by taking this action, turning it into a conditional use means that still we could allow automotive and fuel sales right next to a zoned residential property if we decided to do so as a council, because
So-
that's what we can do currently
Yeah, no, that's what you can
under
do.
a special use.
So yeah, conditional use and special use, they're the same. It's just a change in the word. But what this is saying is that we're going to continue allowing it as a conditional use, but it will not be allowed if it is touching that residential property, if it shares a lot line with a residentially zoned property. So if it's conditional, and one of the conditions that it has to meet, otherwise we won't allow it, is that it cannot be sharing a lot line with a residential property.
So in that sense, conditional use is not like
It's a
a
limited
current special
conditional
use.
It's like a limited conditional, a limited special use, a limited conditional use. It's kind of an additional. It's just one of the conditions that it has to meet in order for us to allow it. Otherwise, it's not allowed.
So with special uses or conditional uses currently, I mean, the council does have some flexibility to modify parking requirements or, some bulk requirements, but not in the case, let's just use like a tobacco retailer. We have a 1,000-foot separator between tobacco retailers or licensed uses. You can't change that number. The 1,000 foot is a hard number in the zoning code.
Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
So that
Yeah.
sounded like the other category that you had given us before of, what was it, an L?
Yeah. So the difference is that if the process that they follow afterwards. So if it's a limited use, the process
Limited
after it is that it's a permitted use basically after, and we don't have to go to council with it. This is saying that. So what would happen with these with these auto repair shops is they would come in, and they would come to us and say, we want to go in this property, and we would say, okay, you meet our zoning, you are not sharing a lot line with residential. Now you're going to go through the conditional use process. You're going to have to go to planning commission. You're going to have to go to common council, and then however, if they come to us and they're like, hey, we want to go here, and they don't share, or they do share a lot line, sorry, and then we'd be like, no, our zoning says you can't do that, and it'd be dead.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what this one is saying. Yep.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. I don't know what's next.
Oh, structures. Okay, yeah, this is me. Thanks.
Those are the bulk of our discussion items too, so it should be a little bit.
You'll be here all night.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll try to get through this one a little faster. But I mean, this, in terms of structures, these are all of your setbacks. And some of the more significant changes, I guess, within this are, first and foremost, within the RA and RB districts, we're removing the minimum lot areas. So in the RA, existing up on the very top there above RA1, RA2, RA3, those are the minimum lot areas right now as we have in our current zoning ordinance. So 10,000 square feet minimum lot area for RA1 district, Orchard Hills area, for instance.
I live there.
RA2, RA3 are 7,200 and 6,000 respectively, and an RB, one of our very common districts on the east side of the city, is minimum lot area of 3,600 square feet. And then when you start getting up in the multifamily zoning districts, there is no minimum lot area currently. So what we're doing though, within this table, going from that list form to a table format, by eliminating the minimum lot requirement, we're not really going to be saying that we're shrinking lot sizes or anything like that. The setbacks that we have in here and the lot coverage requirements,
Lot width especially.
oh, and lot width especially, are controlling that from really changing much. So we don't really see the need to have a sort of arbitrary, or in this case, what our current minimum lots are, because the lot width, the coverages, and the setbacks are going to more or less dictate the size of the lot. You have to have, through those things, you're going to get to probably really close to, if not right on, what those minimum lot areas currently are. So we're simplifying with that respect. So in terms of the height, within the RA districts, really not changing too much within the RA districts. In the RB district, we're going from 35 feet to 40 feet, and this is again to support a little bit more, in some cases, potentially density. Roof pitches on the traditional east side of West Dallas, we do have typically, some cases smaller lots, but in maybe taller homes. So we want to just accommodate, roof pitches, the additional capacity for, whether it be a third floor or just a more, steeper pitched roof on a duplex. And then also we're introducing maximum lot widths, not to exceed certain numbers. So in the case of RA, where am I here? Just in terms of the maximum lot width, in the RA district, we don't have a maximum, but in the case of RA2, RA3, you see the maximums that are pretty generous. So I don't know if there's any questions on this, if you had a chance to really look at it, but it is, in some respects, it's changing somewhat in terms of the height, the elimination of the minimum lot size, and then in the case of some of the setbacks, minimum side yard setbacks for the RA1 are actually increasing a little bit, and then the RA2 are increasing slightly. RA3 and RB are more or less generally consistent.
I have no real input on it.
Okay.
Looks fine to me.
I vote yes. There we go.
All right, good. And commercial zoning district regulations. So here we have, in this case, maximum floor area ratios within our C1, C2 districts. And again, just promoting more density. The front yard setback in the C1 district is actually 0. I mean, so if you think of our downtown West Dallas area, all of the buildings for the most part are right up to the property line, right up to the sidewalk.
So if we build a new city hall, it's gonna have to get pushed forward.
If we build a new city hall, I guess the maximum front yard setback is saying build it up to the property line.
We could give ourselves a variance as
No,
well.
but, I mean, that's what you're talking about, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, so that's what we're talking about. So I guess with this, though, there is the appeal process within the setback, the bulk requirements. You do have an appeal in this case for these setbacks and coverages, but this is what's proposed.
And remind us, what's the floor area ratio? So the maximum is a 2-story building, is that what that means?
So that is a complicated subject. Yeah, it's like a ratio of the size of the lot to the size of the building. And actually, since we wrote this, we've been looking at this further, and we want to simplify things more. Even licensed architects have a hard time sometimes determining what a floor area ratio is going to be when they're envisioning a building. So we're going to switch to just a height maximum. We don't include that in this because the draft we shared with you, we didn't come up with that yet. We didn't think that far ahead yet, and we've kind of looked at this even further, and we think the floor area ratio is, for most of the commercial districts, it's going to be too complicated for somebody to figure out. We want to keep things as simple as possible with our code, so we're going to switch to a height, most likely. We just hadn't gotten to that yet when we shared it with you guys originally.
Okay, good.
So in this case, if it's stated as 2.0, or let's just say 1.0 of a C4, it's probably the easiest one to understand. It's a 1-to-1 ratio. So if you have a 10,000 square foot lot, you can have a 10,000 square foot building. Of course, you have to factor in setbacks, and if you want parking, you have to factor that in.
It could be a 5,000 square foot building with, but 2 stories.
Exactly. You can go up. Right. Yeah. That's what it means.
Yeah.
Yeah, what if I want to build a 28-story building?
Invite him to
You
West
gotta go to
Dallas.
Well, that means you probably already met with Patrick Schloss, and he said keep it under 72 floors or
And there's-
something.
yeah, right. I'm kind of joking, but I'm kind of serious. What does our code say about a proposed 28-story building?
So-
and what do you propose to, if any, in the changes?
So right now, the code says as long as the floor area ratio is a certain amount, it's fine. So basically, you can have a big lot with a smaller tower that goes pretty tall, and that's okay in some cases. What we're proposing right now is essentially kind of keeping with that, but what we're gonna when we update this, we're gonna say, you know, we're gonna have a set height limit in every commercial district. So I guess I wish we had this included in here,
Yeah.
but I think in our next proposal that we will share with you guys, when we actually bring this to Plan Commission and to council again, there would be a height limit of, you know, say 65 feet in our C2 district. So it would essentially only allow for maybe a five-story building maximum with smaller floors, or you could do a 4-story with taller floors. But we would have these kind of set height limits. And then if somebody were to come to us with a big tower and we wanted that, we could do a variance for them and kind of, you know, that it would still be possible, but it would just have to go through. It would take more time for
You
them
would
to
have
get through.
discretion.
Perfect.
to do
That's
so,
the answer
yeah.
I want to hear.
Yep.
Thank you.
Next slide is to clarify some of the regulations for accessory buildings. Vince, this to your point, with respect to the height. In some cases, yeah, Vince, we had garages with very tall walls and or steeper roof pitches that looked very large, like commercial buildings. Since that time, we actually proposed an ordinance to the Common Council some years, maybe 2 or 3 years ago, and
Yeah.
we've adjusted that somewhat to allow for up to a 10-foot high sidewall, exterior wall,
Yeah.
and then with up to an 18-foot high building height, not to exceed the principal building on the lot. So I think we've addressed. I know there have been some that have happened, but we've adjusted our ordinance since that
Yeah,
time.
I think it was a great idea, Steve. You know, in all fairness, the neighbors, they all raise hell about it, you know.
Yeah.
Because it really doesn't match us, you know, I mean,
Yeah.
there was something that happens, it's over now, you know,
Yeah.
so.
But with respect to the actual accessory buildings, though, so we have
Couple,
the 3
two on
different types of
117th
accessory
Street
buildings. The
across
first
from
column, or I'm sorry, the second column over from where it's under bulk control, it says accessory dwelling units. And then the next column is garage, and then there's other accessory buildings. So, for instance, the height of an accessory dwelling unit, we're saying a max exterior wall height of 20 feet, or height of principal structure, whichever is less. So we're just trying to, certainly if you're going to have a unit above a garage, a 10-foot high wall isn't going to cut it, because it's that first 10 feet is going to be probably for the vehicles, and then
Yes.
above that, you'll have, the living space above
Sure.
that. And just moving across in terms of height with the garage, really no change there, 18 feet as it is now within the code, and not to exceed the height of a principal building, I guess whichever is less. And then other accessory building, max height of 15 feet. So, for instance, a shed, a storage shed in your backyard, for your lawn mowing equipment or snow blower, that shouldn't exceed 15 feet in height. And then the size requirements for accessory dwelling unit, the max size of 650 square feet or 50% of the principal structure. So, whichever is less. And then the garage, max of 1,000 feet, which is today's standard. And then the shed or other accessory building is 150 square feet, which is current. The rest of these are really, for the accessory dwelling units, that's primarily the main, change here that's happening. We're saying you have to have a minimum separation or setback between the principal building and your accessory dwelling unit of about 10 feet. And then the front setback, it needs to be 60 feet back from the front lot line. And that's, your principal building will be in the front portion of the lot, and then your accessory dwelling unit could be behind it. And you can have setbacks of 3 feet and 5 feet from an alley. But everything else is primarily the same. The other 2 columns for garages and accessory buildings are the same.
Sure.
Mr. Chair, going back to the home occupancy, for the accessory dwelling, would this be allowed to have home occupancy as well?
Business in an
occupancy?
ADU?
Yeah. Because technically, it will be.
Make your backyard little place your.
Exactly, we could turn this into our little business
So
studio.
the way the home occupancy restrictions are written is that there's kind of a principal use.
Of the building.
The principal use has to be met, so it has to be in a 1-unit dwelling, a 2-unit dwelling, or a residential condominium. So I guess if somebody had bought an ADU as a condo, and they owned it in that way, it would be okay. But otherwise, it would have to be in a 1-unit dwelling or a 2-unit dwelling. So I think
more what
unlikely.
she's asking is if I own my home,
Mhm.
I build my little
ADU thing.
ADU out back, could I run my art studio, my dog grooming business out of
As
there?
long as it
Not a
doesn't
dwelling
occupy
unit.
more than
Well-
25% of that dwelling unit.
Oh, and at 600 square feet, 25%, you wouldn't
Yeah,
Be
pretty small.
Yeah.
Good point.
get a sink.
Yeah.
And, yeah, and
We
depending,
want small dogs.
Yes, yeah.
Tiny dogs,
Very small.
smaller
budget.
than that possum.
So a shed at 150 square feet is about 12 by 12, but it could be 15 feet tall?
yeah.
That's a weird,
Dimension.
that's weird. That's taller than it is wide.
Yep. That's
Yeah,
I guess
that's
that
right.
might, that would include,
Yeah.
but it could have a flat
Well, you
roof.
gotta have a pitch on the
Yeah,
roof.
but it could be a flat roof.
It
You could
could
have a
be.
roof on a shed.
It could be. I got a shed in the back and it's got a pitched
Yeah.
roof to match the house.
Yeah.
all right. Move forward.
Next.
And then,
Quick,
yeah, I guess just updating some of the regulations for structures in the yard, really pretty much the same as what's in our current code, just more in a table format. 3 new features are being added for rain barrels, compost barrels, and like planter boxes, whether it be a square foot garden or an actual annual garden. So, and basically what this means is that you can have these types of features, these accessory structures in your yard, and just say for instance like a compost, it can't be in your front yard because it's, that cell is blank, but it could be in your side yard or your rear yard as a limited use. And by limited use, again, there's some conditions. The conditions would be subject to our health department, section chapter 7 of the health, which basically covers, you know, they don't want it to become a food source for rats, and you know, it has to be kept in a certain manner. So that's currently regulated in chapter 7. So that's why that is called off in the limitation.
I don't see satellite dish on there. Remember the old school? satellite dish? I didn't see beehive either.
Did rain
No,
barrels before have to be permitted?
No.
They were just our code just ignored them. So
Oh, I
this
see.
is
So you're just adding
yeah.
it, okay.
We actually we consulted with MMSD. They had kind of prepared some code overview kind of stuff before, and they just recommended adding some things in to make it more clear for people. Essentially, is what we're doing.
Do we not allow
Yeah.
beehives?
I don't know if we do or not. That'd be something I have to. It's like one of those. Do we allow chickens and yeah?
Well, that's
you know,
different.
Yeah.
Well, and there's honeybee hives.
Right, we
Then
don't
there's-
allow chickens.
No, we don't allow chickens,
don't allow
but
chickens.
it would probably be in our health chapter. I mean, as far as whether or not beehives are a thing.
I thought we certainly talked about that at length. I'm not sure where it ended up.
We can look into that.
We don't know,
Let me look
we
at.
don't allow beehives?
I'm gonna take a look at chapter 7 real quick and just hit beehive once and see what.
Because a beehive would be a structure, I mean, a honeybee hive is a structure.
Yeah, when they build.
There's
the
other
structure.
kinds of
Yeah.
beehives too that are not structure, I mean,
No,
like
it's
mason
spinning.
bees.
I have mason bees.
I
I
know
want a
people,
bathhouse.
I know people with beehives.
Like a big bathhouse, please.
Well, it's taking a while to search here, so
No chickens.
We'll get back to you on that.
I'll get back in that.
All right.
Be near
So
the
the last big change we'll talk about is to our parking code. So this is our proposed motor vehicle parking table. So the big thing here is that we're going to be shifting from a minimum-based parking code to a maximum-based parking code. So what this means is right now our regulations are basically set at, we say, you know, here's the estimated peak, you know, kind of peak number of cars for this site. You need to have more parking than that. So you need to have an excess of parking, and that wastes a lot of
Parking lots.
that's why we have Highway 100 with huge parking lots everywhere. Yeah, it's filling our city's land with this unproductive, not really, you know, lowers our taxable value.
Good deal.
It also discourages development by, you know, increasing the cost to developers. So this is really a key strategy that we think will be helpful to building the city's taxable value, promoting redevelopment along corridors like Highway 100. Common Council would still have the authority to adjust parking requirements like you guys do right now. So if there is some sort of special case, that's still something we can be flexible with. The right shows this proposed table. So just a couple highlights. Something like a Malta, you know, if you had an apartment building, you'd have to have, you could not have more than 2 parking stalls per unit. That's, you know, that's kind of what we would say.
Per unit or bedroom?
Per unit. per unit. And usually what we see with our, and we'll show you some examples of recent apartment buildings that have been built, but a lot of times with apartments, there's a mix of units in the thing, a lot of one bedroom units, a couple 2 bedrooms, maybe 1 or 2 3 bedrooms. So a lot of times it'll balance, it kind of balances out where, some units,
1.2 or something.
yeah, a lot of units, like I have an apartment, I don't have a car, then there's
You don't
somebody.
have a car?
I don't have a car. There's other people.
Bart's brother.
Yeah, that's right. The new Bart.
Yeah, but then there's other people in my building who have 2 cars, so it kind of balances out.
Sorry for exaggerating.
No, it's all good. It's all good.
Yeah. Very good.
Another thing, you might see in retail, we'll say now you can't have more than 3 cars per amount of floor area. That's kind of flipping the regulation we had before on its head, basically. Kind of the same strategy, just a different number and maximum type. And then the ones with asterisks, you'll see, those are just going to be subject to special permit reviews. So it gives us even more flexibility and can be more case specific in those ones. So we kind of did some study on what this impact from switching from a minimum to maximum based parking code would be, and it looks all good. Most businesses would not be really impacted at all. The changes are kind of, the amount of parking they have would have met it before and it would meet it now. It's kind of flipping over and under it. So what we do see though is that these large empty parking lots, the examples we have here are of Home Depot, the former Sam's Club, and Dollar General. These are these are buildings with big parking lots, and they often provided more parking than even our minimum suggested. So Home Depot, they built 540 spaces. Our code said you have to build at least 485, so they went like 60 over what we had said. Our new code would say you can't have more than 474, so they would have been limited. That would have saved us 70 parking spaces. That could have been more building area. They could have split off the lot. It could have been landscaping, green space. Yeah, there's a lot of things that could have been more productive for our city than just parking spaces that aren't ever used.
Absolutely.
The table on the right then, this shows some of our more desirable developments. Some of these big projects that we've had in recent years, we've had to have you guys do waivers for give variances to them for their parking, and that kind of creates an extra burden on them to get that done. So in this new code, they would meet it without needing a variance. So for example, Sona, the building that's being built right now, they're providing 154 stalls for their apartments. Our code right now says they have to do at least 176. So they do a very extensive study of the market whenever they're going to propose a new building, so that they don't have to do more parking than they need to because it's really expensive. And now they can do that, and they don't even need to worry about the variance. So this is the effect we want to have is going to be had on our properties. Any questions about this before we move on?
2 things.
Yeah.
I noticed when I drive down National Avenue at night, there's a lot of cars on National Avenue I assume from the west already anyways. What happens when we do this with Sona? I think there's cars, the on-street parking on National Avenue, I mean, we can manage that somehow, change it to 4-hour parking instead of, I think it's unregulated right now.
Yep.
And I don't know, I mean, I'm pretty sure every tenant at the west gets an underground parking space. It's not an additional fee.
Yeah, it's
still-
additional fee, I
It
think.
is an additional
Yeah.
fee?
Pretty sure it is.
Have to ask my-
$60.
I heard it, yeah.
$70 a month.
Yeah.
How much?
$60 to $70 a month.
Yeah.
So those people are choosing not to park in the underground and getting an overnight permit to park on our street.
Yeah.
This kind of brings up a good point about other things you can do with parking. And one thing I know a lot of cities are looking at or turning to again are having paid on-street parking. It's a good way to manage parking and also generate revenue for the city. So that's, this is not part of the zoning code thing at all, but there's other policy options, in the future that if there is trouble with on-street parking, doing things like that.
Our overnight parking is cheap.
Yeah.
It is. I mean, I think it is like 30 cents a day or something, right? Is it $100 a year?
Yeah.
25 a quarter? Yeah, it is, but that's a different conversation.
Yep.
But I just wanted to bring that up. I'm in favor of this, and then my next question is, I'm thinking of Pick and Save that I frequent over here. There's essentially a cut-through road, if you picture the cut-through road that people use.
Yeah.
I don't think I ever see a single car parked on the west side of that
Yeah.
cut-through.
That's right.
Not unless
Never.
they're up to no good.
Yeah.
Yeah, right.
That was your car then.
It was.
Well,
Lights
the
out.
west call it Third of the Pick and Save parking lot over here on 68th and National, there's never a car parked there. Are we gonna tell these property owners, guess what? Remember when you came here 20 years ago or whatever, we made you have this parking lot? No, we don't need to anymore. Why don't you think about developing that? Are we gonna, I think we should.
I do too.
There you go,
Marty,
Patrick.
I think those areas are always open for development, though.
Well, they came in, they put the service station there.
But they might-
which we allowed.
Yeah, no, but they might think, there's no way the city made us have all this parking. I think we need to
Yeah.
tell the Home Depots
I agree.
and the
Yeah.
Pick and Saves that we've changed, just, hey, FYI,
Yeah.
if you're thinking about doing something else.
Yep.
We're, but that might trigger a whole parking lot and then more landscaping and all that, it might not be worth their while. But I think if we're gonna do
Then
this,
let them decide.
Yeah. We should tell these big property owners that have this big sea of asphalt,
Right.
that we shouldn't wait for the new guy to come through.
Yeah,
We should
I think
tell
that's a great idea. Patrick,
Patrick.
once we pass this, we can work with you guys to get that out there.
This is something that lot there has always bothered me.
Yeah,
because
me
it's
too.
like, does nothing and then they just pile snow there or
Yes.
something.
Yep.
And it's just not the way, but it's even, I just had this
The way
conversation last week about
from
our
the
downtown
Mandalorian.
parking lot.
Yeah, we have too much free parking in the downtown.
There's a
Yeah,
lot
we
of
do.
free
We-
parking and
Thank you.
we don't have a parking problem.
No.
We have a parking problem in the sense that we have a surplus.
Yes.
And that really, with the land we have, we're landlocked. So we have to use
We gotta
everything
find
we
more-
have. You can also.
More new
incorporate
construction,
parking.
net new construction.
As we see at Bay Shore and then what we've seen at the corners is parking is built into the development.
Mm-hmm.
More, like you park underneath and you walk up. I mean, the idea is, you gotta get good economic power to generate that development. That's the thing, you gotta have tenants that pay the higher rent, but that, I think a lot of big box stores after COVID here, and as how we use cars change, they're gonna look at how to maximize that land.
Yeah, they should.
Because I see, the pick up the groceries and leave, and that's the new element. So there aren't people just staying there for a long period of time.
There for 5 minutes
And you're
instead of
paying,
45.
when they're on their leases, they're paying something called a CAM cost each month for all the maintenance of those parking lots. And they're probably going, why are we paying this when people are just coming and going? That's one thing. Two is, a lot of young generation, that one. Don't own a car, but if they use a car, they're gonna use Lyft or Uber and things like that, so they don't even have a car that parks. And I think through the evolution of the car, it may just even just bring you to the front door, drop you off, you do whatever,
Come back and pick you up.
and it'll come back and pick you up. So where that car goes in the meantime, or there's shared cars. You have to think of the future. So,
Cruising out under
I
it.
think it's going to,
Yeah.
it's going to evolve and change. So this land mass that we have, it'd be great to green it up, the whole parking lot. We do development, we gotta do stormwater retention. Anytime you disrupt an acre or so, yeah, we should maximize that. Now.
Yeah, I
getting the
agree
owners
with,
to agree to that is the next thing, because a lot of it, what we face in leases that say, I get so much parking in front of my place, and it's in their lease. So the owner of that leases wants the development, but the store may not wanna relinquish those parking stalls.
Mr. Chair. I agree with you with that parking lot next to the apartment by Pick and Save.
Be a whole nother apartment building.
Yeah, the fact has been occurring that a lot of homeless people with vans and stuff like that off and on, I've been getting complaints from Pick and Save, well, people leave their apartment, just stay there overnight. They sleep there, and so the police have to go there and tell them to get out of there, It
Don't worry, Vince, that's
happens
coming
off
into
and
my
on.
district with the redistricting. Pick and Save's coming into my district. You're done. it'll be
I
my
know,
problem from
and
now
you
on.
can have it then, yeah, I'm glad. I'm
We're already
glad,
on it.
I'm glad.
We're already on it.
So we've got one more really quick thing. I know we've taken up a lot of your time, so we'll get through it quick. We are also going to be adding a very minimal light burden bicycle parking requirement. Right now, we're basically, in practice, we require a lot of developments to add a bike rack when we do it, and we're just kind of codifying that practice so it's very clear. So when they come to us, they know what to expect. And so these will be just really to ensure that there's this accessible bike parking throughout the city with good location and design standards. It's kind of advancing our complete streets policy, and they're very minimal. If you're a very small business, you aren't going to be forced to add a bike rack unless you're more than 3,000 square feet. So a lot of businesses won't even be impacted.
What's an example of a 3,000? Do you know off the top of your head what 3,000?
3,000 square
Maybe
feet.
30 feet, 100 feet deep.
Yeah, nothing in our downtown would be that. I don't
Well,
think.
there's probably
Eh,
something.
there might
Maybe
be
a
some,
couple
like,
big
the co-work
ones.
space would be probably that, would be over that. But like bread peddlers, really small space. The Mark Lutz's bake sale, that's only 900 square feet. So, but it's in those cases we have bike racks that we can put in the city right of way. So it's
And a bike rack in the city right away might satisfy the needs for
Yep.
two or three businesses on the street.
Yeah, and that's
correct?
that's a good point.
At least for a start.
They just have to have within, I think, 100 feet of their entrance. If there's a bike rack, then they're good. They're served. So, and then Tony, I don't know if you want to finish this
Every
off.
light
here.
pole is a bike rack too.
It's not.
Voice of experience.
Yeah, it is,
Supposed
yeah,
to
that's
be.
right. Not right.
If you have the right lock.
Yeah, yes. yeah.
So with all of that, we just want to let you know that we're sending out a community survey tomorrow through our communications department, and we would really appreciate it if you
Spread the word.
would like to send it out to your constituents. That'd be great to get them involved and give them a chance to just have weigh in and have some input on this important zoning code update.
Are we gonna have a link on the website for that, Tony, or is it gonna be?
Yeah, we'll
Yeah,
add it to
okay.
our website as well, and then share it on our social. Send it all to you all.
Tony, where'd you take that picture from? It's look familiar to me, yeah.
That's from Chicago.
It's
Oh, Scotland?
We have one part of a survey is just taking pictures of different types of places and seeing which ones people
Yeah,
prefer
yeah.
to kind of get a sense for that.
Clark Street, maybe.
it's 60th and Burnham in about 5 years.
Yeah, there you go.
I like
That's
that.
your old barber shop.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it used to be my shop, and now
Because
it's
he's cutting hair.
a junkyard, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing it from his house now. He just admitted to it.
Yeah, I like that.
Real quick, so we've
I
got
like her, Nana. I like
different
that.
options for.
Gotta take business away from her.
He's still talking.
Let's pay attention to Tony.
Just a couple more. Okay, so today is February 8th. That's in the orange. That's today. Sending out the community survey tomorrow. Our first option for our timeline is in a couple weeks. We would present this to Plan Commission and then have a public hearing with Common Council on March 17th. That's our fast option. Our slower option is to meet with Plan Commission on March 23rd and present to have a public hearing on April 7th.
I would not pick March 17th.
Why March 17th?
It's a Thursday.
That's
Well,
it's
there's-
shifted because of
Patrick's Day.
There's an election on the Tuesday, the typical Tuesday council. I believe there's
Not
a.
in March.
That's April.
That's April.
April.
Did we get that wrong?
possible.
Day.
I did
All right.
flip my dates around. I flipped my dates around recently,
Why
so
are we
it was
meeting on
probably
St.
me.
Patrick's Day.
Right.
The Mayor Dan Devine
He's not gonna be there. Yeah.
Okay.
February 15th was moved to February 17th, but
Right.
March 15th, we do have a
Okay.
council meeting.
That's my bad, y'all. That's
No, we don't have one on March 5th. No, we don't have one on March 15th.
Okay.
Got it the first and the third.
First and the third,
Yeah.
yes.
So any
Talk about
any comments on either of these
Yeah,
two
we're back to our
timelines?
normal council meetings, first
Yeah,
and
the
third.
first Tuesday is March 1st, and the
And the
third
third
is
is
the
the
15th.
The
15th.
15th.
Right.
So we
It's
could
right
we
here,
could
that's what I
go
just
the
said.
15th then.
15th, yes.
15th for our
Just
fast
ignore
option.
the
On the left,
typo. Just ignore it. Long presentation, last slide.
Yeah, now it's on the right.
Well, thank you all for your time and your input. This
Thank you.
gave us
Thanks for all your hard work,
lots of
guys.
input.
Yeah, right. Yeah, thank you. Right.
All right.
Very good.
All right.
You're gonna
Okay.
call us in on Patty's?
Motion to adjourn?
Oh, I move we adjourn.
Second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.